Wow.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Lorebeards and
Hi.
Roleplaying. It's our season finale.
Yeah, indeed it is. This is the last episode of season 1. Wow, this is 16, right?
That's right. That's right, Rita, as it's commonly said on other cartoon shows. We should probably introduce ourselves before we get into today's topic. Who are you, Vera?
I'm Vera, Verisimilitude. I am one of the writers for Warhammer Fantasy, the Old World RPG, and Age of Sigmar Soulbound. I'm a thing maker. I do stuff. I'm a creature. Hi.
A creature. A creature. That's a good way to put it. Nice. I am also a creature. My name is Ross Watson. I'm a game designer and author. I have written over 100 different role-playing game products in my time. The highlights being Torg Eternity, Star Wars Edge of the Empire, most of the Warhammer 40k role-playing game line, and Savage Worlds Rifts. So, with all that out of the way, with our introductions out of the way, we're here today to talk about one of the craziest things can actually happen at the table, which is a TPK or a total party kill. Would you like to define that term, Vera?
Yeah, well, here at the end of the season, we're talking about endings, sometimes sudden endings to a campaign.
Oh no!
In some ways, a total party kill is about as straightforward a concept as it gets. It's when the entirety of the party, the totality of your party of adventurers, is killed. They die.
That's right. No survivors.
Now, there are effective total party kills where like almost everyone dies and you're in a similar position. There's perhaps one survivor, but a TPK really is the encounter gets so bad that there are no living characters left at the end.
And it is the most feared outcome at any gaming table, primarily because it threatens campaign continuity. Any years of invested story, character development, NPC relationships, world building, all of this can be erased in a single session with a TPK.
Well, I'm not certain it threatens campaign continuity. I would say that it solidifies campaign continuity immediately.
Well, we're going to talk about some ways you can come back from it, though. So that's why I wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah, obviously this could be an unsatisfying ending, depending, because a lot of the time TPKs are pretty final, right? Or at least they would naturally bring an end to the story.
Often they're final. Yeah, I agree. We got a super chat. Would you like to read this one?
The exiled one, thank you so much for the chat. My Wrath and Glory party just got taken by the Drukhari. No one wanted to be prisoners, so we shall be playing D&D again. It was a good year, though. Oh, no. Yeah, that is close to a TPK. There are a few scenarios that are similar in nature to a TPK that also are capable of bringing a narrative to a grinding halt.
Total party capture, though, is something we will discuss because that is a way to avoid a kill, a TPK as opposed to TPC, total party capture. A little bummed that the first example is literally my game, Wrath of Glory, the one I designed.
Well, you put those nasty Drukhari in there, right?
I mean, there's definitely bad guys in that game.
It is another end state, though, possibly. Like, I can appreciate it being a distinct vibe shift that the entire party is captured. There are some scenarios like that are easier to navigate out of than others, and a total party kill is the least easy to navigate out of, perhaps.
Right. And I think we should definitely mention here that there are different types of TPKs. The so-called true TPK is the one that happens due to random chance. The dice just screw you, and everyone takes too much damage, and the death saves are just not there that day, right?
Yeah, it is sort of the classic example of why it's scary to have open rolls at the table in D&D.
Right.
The DM rolls one crit, then a confirm, then another, and suddenly a relatively regular, balanced encounter has turned into sudden death for multiple characters.
That's right. And a GM can intervene to spare the party through capture or resurrection or narrative sleight of hand And all those things are a DM that's preventing a TPK, not a TPK itself. So just to be clear about that. A genuine TPK, a true TPK, is all the characters are dead with no narrative lifeline. It is that is their honest, unfiltered outcome. Now, why do TPKs happen?
Well, you've listed the first reason. Die rolling. People die when you roll die. This can happen. Another reason is poor planning or foolishness, ineptitude, wherein the party does some really stupid things over and over sequentially until they catch up with them in sudden and catastrophic fashion. They repeatedly say, yes, I am sure about that, and the outcome is disaster. And I would say the third reason is narrative climax. The party makes their way to the Dark Lord. They're as prepared as they can be, and they just aren't ready. And it's sad.
That's true. That's true. I think I do think it's important to point out. I'm sorry, just what you said was very funny. I love it. Yeah, the dice can simply not cooperate and cause a TPK. Sometimes the encounter can be very well designed. The players can make reasonable decisions, and fate intervenes anyway. Run of natural ones on attack rolls, and I have seen it happen. Crits twice in a row from the main bad guy boss. Seen that happen too. Concentration spell that gets lost on the very first hit and screws everybody in the party. These are all part of the game. A veteran DM knows that dice are random and knows that TPKs are a natural part of playing the game. But the question is, what does the GM do in that moment when the bad luck pushes a fair encounter towards catastrophe?
And it can be hard to know. Dark Heresy, for example, has psychic phenomena and perils of the warp tables that are notorious for leading to TPK, because when daemons appear, greater daemons especially, very bad things are happening suddenly. If the Space Hulk rips out of the warp into your party, it can be a very challenging scenario.
That's another case of the dice screwing you over, because you're first you have to mishap, and then you get the wrong result on the table. Vera, you said something earlier that I wanted to comment on, and that's like, if a DM asks, "Are you sure?" That's usually a really good indicator that whatever you're about to try is hazardous and could potentially lead to a TPK.
Yeah, Logan points out that a TPK is almost always from incompetence. I think that is possibly true, especially in tables where the DM wants to like establish consequence. You can very much have that scenario where you ask, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "Yep, we're sure," and they keep doing it, and you just, "All right, well, you're buying the ticket, you're taking the ride. Welcome to this scenario."
Logan, I hear you, buddy. I would say, in my experience, you are often right, but not always right. I remember a session of D&D. This would have been 3.5, where my party and I, we were all 6th-level adventurers, and we were going to take on some trolls. And we were prepared. We had acid. We had fire. We had the things you needed to fight trolls. And the dice just did not cooperate. And every time the trolls attacked us, they got that hit-rend combo for lots of damage. We were hitting them and rolling minimum damage, even on things like Melf's Acid Arrow and Flaming Sphere. I was the wizard in this party, FYI. We had a survivor, that being the archer who ran away after everyone else was slaughtered by the trolls, who just could not be stopped from rampaging. It wasn't the DM's fault. Like, a troll encounter for 6th-level characters, that's perfectly reasonable. It wasn't our fault. Like, none of our tactics were to blame. We tried, I think, very reasonable approaches, and we had a good balanced party, and we even had the tools we needed to succeed. So often, yes, it is incompetence, but not always. And just want to make that very, very clear. We do have a cool super chat here from P2 Jack 2000. Huge fan. Should have named this stream Rolebeards.
Ooh, I like that. That's cute.
I do like that. As a DM, I once TPK'd my party. Me too, buddy. They tried to fight to beat Big Bad Evil Guy early, despite me going, "Are you sure?" It's in
They
all
were
caps,
sure.
so I could hear it shouting.
Yeah, and I will say like the temptation to drop a likely TPK in the party early on into the campaign is higher when they're like making like really foolish choices. There are cases where it can be narratively satisfying in some ways. Just let them buy themselves into that situation because it'll teach them a lesson for the table. Like if you're on session 2 of a slapdash scenario and they're just like really pushing the limit, screwing around, maybe they should all die.
Well, so that brings us to, I think, another point I want to make is the difference between a fair TPK and an unfair TPK. So a fair TPK is one that the party could have prevented. It's better decisions, retreating, preparing. If there's things that a player character could have done to avoid that TPK and it still happens, that's a fair TPK. But an unfair TPK is where the DM has constructed a mathematically unwinnable scenario. And sometimes this can be with the intention to kill the party. I'm not saying that this happens a lot, but I'm sure there are people out there who do it. And I've even seen an adventure path where the idea is to kill the party off and then they all come back as ghosts, which is it's a story that some people have done before in the community. So unfair TPKs, though, they're a very different tone and feel, because a fair TPK, that's hard medicine, right? It's like, that doesn't feel great, but it is part of the game. An unfair TPK, where the GM is like moving the goalposts, or he's throwing impossible challenges at you, or as the knights at the dinner table like to say, it's a grudge monster. We pissed off the GM and he threw something really big and nasty at us. That's a red flag for GM behavior, and it's worth addressing as a group. So
you do want to like give players what they ask for, though. Like if they're like really committed, like, no, we're going to do this no matter what, we're going to pursue this, you kind of have to run it out, right? Because agency matters.
Been there. Actually, the last TPK I was involved in was a very nice guy named Logan, was our game master, and we were playing through Descent into Avernus, and we were still pretty low level characters. We'd just beaten, I think, the first dungeon, and Logan was like, "Hey, I'm gonna take our paladin here who leveled up, and he's gonna go on a little solo quest to, bond closer with his god, and then that's the way we'll level up, because we're doing training to level up in this campaign." I was like, okay, that sounds fun. But the players, we were all like, we could just sit here and watch, or we could participate. I thought, well, there's no reason why we can't go along, right? Why shouldn't we go along on this guy's little quest? If he's okay with it, and the paladin was like, oh, sure, the more the merrier. So we all looked at the game master and said, well, we'd like to go along. And the game master, to his credit, was like, are you sure? Do you really want to do this? And we said yes. And one of the things we ran into were these stupid assassins. Descent into Avernus has some really crazy monsters, and one of them is this assassin that they turn invisible as a bonus action, which
I see.
For low-level characters, that is awful. That is absolutely awful, because that gives them advantage against you. You have disadvantage against them. I mean, it's a huge swing. And these goddamn invisible assassins, who were only like challenge rating 2, and we were like second level. Oh my God, they ripped us apart. We all of us died. Again, I think, except maybe one person, I think we all died. And we were like, well, that was our bad. Not your bad, Logan. That was our bad. We were the ones who insisted on doing this.
Yeah, but it can be hard to estimate consequences sometimes. Like pursuing like the dark whispers is a more obvious sign of extreme danger than, I would say, like, let's tag along with our buddy in the thing he was gonna do solo.
Right, like I think none of us were expecting it to be particularly difficult. And I think maybe that was an expectation that needed some discussion.
Yeah, like in Jack's example, pursuing closure on a character's like ominous whispers that have threaded through the entirety of the campaign is pretty likely to be a big deal, as opposed to like, let's hang out and go on this little side mission together. Because you would think that if it's possible for one party member to handle it, it'd be everyone together will do better.
I mean, that's what we thought, right? I
Yeah.
think fairly reasonably. Here's a good super chat. Would you like to read this one?
Hey, Elemental, thank you so much for the chat. Thank you. Fact, TPK chances triple for each Leroy or Jenkins within 25 miles of the table and go up 10 times if someone unironically called their PC that. Yeah, if somebody calls their PC Leroy McJenkins or something, they're probably not making it past like 3 sessions in.
I mean, he's got a point. He's got a solid point.
You can kill that character and they'll be happy for it.
Another way that TPKs can happen, though, and this is something that I have certainly fallen into, is that the Game Master can make the encounter just too hard. Encounter design is a very tricky thing. Go ahead, Vera.
No, it's true. Finding balance points is challenging. You can expect that the characters will do like certain things to even the odds that they don't see in the moment. Building around environmental scenarios or like special stratagems, or just they can be ambushed, they can fail to see things or notice things they ought to, and things can get out of hand. It's hard to balance encounters. It's hard to ensure that encounters are going to play out kind of as you predict, because there are so many individual choices that play into whether they do, right?
Yes. Here's an example of something that I did that didn't end up killing just one member of the group, but it was an encounter that I designed, and I was like, oh, well, I may have made a major error here. I had a beholder as a bad guy in the particular area, and I rolled randomly for treasure, and it got a ring of water breathing. And I thought, it'd be fun is if this thing wanted to hang out underwater, because it can, and I thought, well, maybe I could just put this at the bottom of a flooded chamber, and it would make the fight just a little more interesting if you're fighting a beholder underwater.
I see.
Right. It turns out that was a little bit of a bridge too far.
So that didn't go well.
Well, the wizard got hit by 2 different rays, and I had him roll, and he rolled Death Ray for the first roll and Disintegration Ray for the second roll. And just the poor guy died and then was transformed into ashes that floated through the water, and there was no way to recover him. And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that at all. Oh my God. Yeah, even a veteran GM can misread their party's capabilities, can underestimate how vulnerable low-level characters are, can overestimate the party's ability to handle legendary resistances or area of effect spells or stacking too many enemies. And the challenge rating in D&D is, it's a rough guideline. It's not a guarantee, and it does particularly struggle to handle things like the action economy.
Well, I would say that in like Pathfinder and 3rd edition, it's not very good. Like, there are a lot of enemies that are way stronger than their challenge rating would indicate. I believe like young dragons have challenge ratings that are like quite low considering how difficult they are. There's a few examples of like creatures with like crowd control abilities that have strangely low challenge ratings. And if you're going by the book and you're trying to like use the mathematical tools they give you to balance encounters, you might be very surprised.
Do you happen to have your 5th edition Monster Manual nearby?
No, I have my 3rd edition Monster Manual 2.
Okay. I was going to say, if anybody out there is curious, look up the Quickling in the Monster Manual and just check out how much damage those little bastards can do. It is shocking how quickly those things can add up very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And we need to probably explain what we're talking about here. Action economy. It is the total number of attacks or spells or actions available to each side per round. Okay, so it's basically the invisible heart of D&D combat. It's the invisible heart of most RPG combat, I should add, actually. Not just D&D. So when the enemies outnumber you, that means they have more actions than you, because each guy gets to take an action. And each character that can't fight or gets either gets killed or disabled in some fashion, that means your situation as the players gets worse, and it gets exponentially worse because you have fewer actions to rely on. So 1 character out of 5 being out of the fight doesn't just reduce the party to 80% effectiveness. It hands the enemy a 20% advantage that compounds every round. This is the death spiral. One player character can drop. The survivors have fewer actions to take to address the situation or deal damage. The enemies are dealing more damage per round because they have fewer targets now to concentrate on. The next player character falls quicker than you might expect, and then it just keeps going until everybody's dead.
It has happened before. It will happen again.
Yep. And now you said something earlier I think I wanted to circle back to, which is the idea that, and we had a super chat about this too, is that player characters usually are the ones that are making the bad decisions that lead to this kind of thing. And a handful of examples of tactical blunders that you can make as a player character. Split the party, first of all. There's a reason why this is like an old school rallying cry, never split the party, and I don't 100% agree with it, but if there's a big fight coming up, I would strongly urge you to consider not splitting the party. As Vera pointed out, ignoring warnings.
Yes.
If the game master is like literally salting the earth with all these dead heroes as you're approaching the final chamber in the dungeon, maybe it's a good time to stop and make a plan. Leaving enemies alive behind you is also a thing. Sometimes if you are stealthing past encounters or using turn undead, those things can and will return. So something to keep in mind about that. That's more of a game master thing than a player thing, but it does rely on player choices. So starting a new encounter in the middle of combat. I have seen players who are like, I'm going to go open that door on my turn and see what's on the other side because you guys have got this, right?
That'll escalate things, yeah.
This couldn't possibly go poorly if I go just open a door in the middle of the fight. Which can trigger additional groups while you're already engaged and compound the action economy problem again.
What could possibly go wrong?
Lack of teamwork. Now, this is definitely more of a vibes thing because there's a lot of ways to contribute, obviously. But if you are tanking your group's effectiveness in mid-fight, think about that. Go ahead, Vera. You were going to say something.
Yeah, and different ways of building your campaign can make these more or less dangerous, right? Like part of the reason that don't split the party was the mantra for so long is that people would run modules for things. And if you're playing through a module where you know exactly what's through the door and you're going to show them that when they go through the door, the mentality is, okay, if they have 2 characters or 4, it's going to be the same group of things. It's possible to be a little more flexible as the GM to alleviate this issue by making an encounter a little less balanced against the players to correspond to how many they're bringing, but you shouldn't always have to do this, nor should it always be expected. So,
true. I think the last reason is one you're going to love. Refusing to retreat.
Ah, yes. My character is a cool hero, and they would die in battle. They sure would.
I think generally speaking, gaming, and especially video gaming, has taught most D&D players that just about every encounter is winnable. And this is obviously something you should probably talk about in session 0 if you are the type of game master where you're gonna come across things you can't beat. And running away is something that the game master wants to see. Then definitely mention this in session 0. But the option to flee is real, but it is often ignored. Because many people see retreating as losing. Like we lost, we suck, we're terrible, we ran away. And that mentality can definitely get your characters killed. OSR, I think, is a little more harsh on this than your typical D&D game. And of course, whatever you're playing is going to have different rules for dying and
right.
How dangerous things are. And this will also have an impact on the tone of your game. Like, what is the tone of your game? If the tone is very lighthearted, then maybe you should discuss what happens if there's a TPK, because that's not going to feel lighthearted.
There are exceptions. There are systems that are designed to let you die a lot, like Eclipse Phase, for example.
Yes.
You have stacks and whatnot that store your character's personalities, and you can run a very gonzo campaign where the goal of every encounter is to die at the end.
True. There are games where the Paranoia comes to mind, where you have 6 clones. And it's a TPK Paranoia is absolutely not the end of the campaign. You just, bring in a new clone.
We've got a super chat from Cole Patterson.
Oh yeah, we got a we have one before that too, but let's read this one here. Just DM'd the Black Cabin quest in the 5e adventure Rime of the Frost Maiden, where the party activates a cursed item that kills them all and makes them ghosts. And as ghosts, they can fix the item to revive themselves. Very fun. That is a cool encounter.
And technically a TPK, because everyone dies.
Technically, yeah. But that's one of those that's, I think, you would remember more fondly. For sure. Though this is actually a really great, take notes on this one, GMs, because, if you have a TPK and you want them to return, making them all ghosts that can interact with some weird item that revives them, hey, that's not a terrible way to fix the problem. And we got a super chat here from P2 Jack 2000. Would you like to read this one?
Yeah, Jack, thank you so much for the cheer. A good example for CR rating being more dangerous than intended is how a GM actually uses the enemy. If the DM is more strategic than the players, GG. Yeah, that's a thing. There's an what do they call it? There's a classic example, it's some named GM's kobolds who are notorious for Tucker's kobolds. Thank you. Who there's a whole stratagem for using guerrilla tactics and effective trap making, truly effective trap making, layers of defense and strategy to turn regular CR1 kobolds, 0.5 kobolds into a nightmare because they are tactical and the players might not be. This can happen in all sorts of ways. We talked about the importance of action economy and how that is compounded when a player goes down. If your enemies understand alpha striking and they understand the importance of bringing down one person in the party and they do that successfully, then suddenly things get a lot harder. If they split the party by using magical effects to create barriers, it can be very dangerous. There are all sorts of things that can take a relatively low-level toolkit and make it extremely dangerous because the players don't see it coming.
I'm really glad you brought up Tucker's kobolds. I have a couple of articles on my Patreon where I talk about applying the methodology of Tucker's kobolds as a very strategic force, as a very smart and cunning force, and applying it to lizardmen in a swamp who serve a black dragon and what that would look like. And I think it's fair to say that there are people out there who are like myself who appreciate a good challenge. They like the idea of facing smarter enemies as opposed to dumb enemies, and they don't like the idea of the game master or the dungeon master handling them with kid gloves. So I've been in two situations with this. I've been the guy who is okay, I have a very strategic mind, and my villains will often do things that are deleterious to the player characters' health because I feel like fighting smarter enemies is more rewarding than dumb enemies. So, for example, I have had enemies who attempt to coup de grace downed player characters.
Oh yeah,
knowing that healing is a thing in that world, and people can just get back up if you don't literally cut their head off, right? And I've been in games where the game master absolutely refused to follow up attacks on anybody who dropped, even with creatures that don't really think, like a golem. And at the time, I remember thinking, what wizard would tell his golem to attack the enemy until they're disabled and then attack a different enemy? You'd think the command would be attack the enemy until they're dead, right? And then move on. So I've been on both sides of this issue. I've been the guy who's been too strategic. I've been the player who wants more strategic. And I've seen, it's definitely a balancing act. Worth discussing in session 0 again, for sure.
Yeah, I think as a certain kind of player, part of your goal at the table is to feel challenged, to feel like you are legitimately overcoming obstacles that matter. And when you can tell the monsters are doing things that don't make sense, they're just chilling out, they're hesitating because you're getting low, it ruins verisimilitude because you can feel the presence of the GM's guiding hand making things softer and easier. And that can be dissatisfying and take you out of the moment, make you feel like less of a hero. This is not a good feeling.
Title drop. anytime you bring up verisimilitude, that's what I think in my head. Title drop.
Look, I think about it a lot, okay?
So some ways to avoid TPKs. Probably the first one is one I've already brought up before, session 0. Have a chat about expectations. Is this a lethal old school game where death is permanent and expected? Or is it a story forward campaign where character deaths are rare and narratively earned? Are players comfortable with consequences driven play, or do they prefer a more heroic narrative style? Is it a beer and pretzels game, or are you like, no, this is for real and we want to earn our gold, our glory?
Yeah, like some of it has to do with the system. Like a game like Call of Cthulhu, a TPK has a very different feeling than a game like 5e, where player death has a different feeling. Because in 5e, you could even in the event of a TPK, you could resurrect all of them. You could just have another crew go in and save them. Could happen. In Call of Cthulhu, probably not.
No, there's an expectation in Call of Cthulhu. Like you play Call of Cthulhu expecting your character to be eventually dead or insane. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah.
But not all D&D games are like that. And I have been very emotionally unprepared for my character to die in the past. So,
well, it can be traumatic, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Because it's often sudden. Like any issue that can lead to a TPK can lead to a single character dying, and that creates other feelings like why me, etc.
So yeah, setting expectations is probably the first and most important way to stop you from having to deal with the TPK. But another way to do it, especially if you're DM, and this is what I do heartily recommend because it's both story and fun, and that is to telegraph danger clearly. One of your most important tools is giving the players information before the encounter that lets them make informed choices. This doesn't mean spoiling the outcome, all right, to be clear. We're talking about environmental signals, right? Is there blood on the walls? Is there scorched earth? Are there bodies of former adventurers in horrible poses? Scattered bones? You can have rumors and lore. There could be NPCs who could tell you that's the most dangerous place on the continent, or my brother died there last year trying to kill the dragon. Hearsay at the tavern or stories of failed expeditions. And then there's the sensory cues. And this is one of my favorites because I love to describe or maybe even over describe sometimes. So you can talk about unnatural silence. You can talk about the smell of sulfur, the sound of something massive moving through the dark. You could even, of course, have it. You have your monster speak if they speak, and say things like, the death to all who enter here, or leave signs behind. Another good one.
Oh yeah, ominous notes, a la Resident Evil and so on.
Visible consequences is another really good one. Like rust monsters used to be horrible because they could destroy your enchanted weapons and armor. So seeing a pile of destroyed weapons and armor before you fight a rust monster would be a good way to prepare for that. If you see a bunch of bodies near the dungeon entrance, if you see a journal that they pick up and find says, oh, we came this way before you and met a horrible end, and the last word is all like scrawled in blood coming down the edge of the page.
They killed me. Ah!
Right, I was just thinking that from the Monty Python. But for real, no, that works. That worked in that movie too. They were all like, oh, yeah, something bad is here.
The clarity helps.
So that is the first thing I would say is the telegraphing danger. What else would you add here, Vera?
To avoid TPKs, teaching lessons gradually can be good. Sometimes it's good to have an encounter that's designed to be very difficult that has lower consequences as a consequence of, failing it. Training battles, combat against better intentioned NPCs or those who were more interested in mocking the characters than killing them outright. Ways to introduce concepts like, hey, if you get crowd control, that's bad, or hey, this can happen if you're getting targeted down by a lot of ranged enemies. Teaching them lessons like that will make them want to prepare better in future, right?
Honestly, I think this is one of the reasons why so many anime and manga have tournament arcs. Is it's a great way to show off what your characters can do and also educate them about the threats that they're going to face outside of a structured sporting event, if you will. So if you wanted to prepare people for a big fight, you could have a episode or arc or brief campaign, what have you, where they're maybe fighting in organized gladiatorial events, or they're being trained by a master wizard or an ancient warrior. In any case, you give them a taste of it without the consequence being there, or at least not without the consequence being final, prior to the real main event.
Yeah, and this concept kind of exists in video game design also, wherein it's useful to introduce a concept and then iterate on it. And by the time you're iterating on it in ways that can be lethal, hopefully they kind of understand what's happening.
Ooh, we have super chat from Spitfire 703. A player in a 3.5 game I was in got grabbed by an illithid. Oh, that's never good.
Ooh.
The GM asked him if he wanted it to be nice or realistic. The player said realistic, and the illithid immediately ate his brain.
Well, he'll never forget that, or perhaps instantly forgot that. But anyway, that's that's how it can be. Some enemies will just kill you in D&D, and there are diamonds to resurrect you if they do, but you need that.
Yeah. One of my most favorite games ever is one I died in twice. My character died twice. Died the fewest amount of times out of everyone in the party because we had high-level clerics and we had money and we had lots of diamonds on hand. So using raised deads and resurrects was something that we just did in that game. It was D&D is not the only game where these things exist, but it is certainly a hallmark of D&D and a lot of other games. For example, Traveler or Star Wars don't have the same recourses. And once you're dead, you are likely permanently dead in many other games when you die.
Yeah, like D&D is so chill about player death. Like in Baldur's Gate 3 Honor Mode, for example, it's almost expected that half the party will die and then get resurrected within 5 minutes and come back to the same encounter to fight the still injured enemies.
Oh, Baldur's Gate 3. I stopped playing that. I should really get back to it.
It's fun. It's hard, though.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Game Master's ability to scale an encounter appropriately is part of it. Can you honestly assess your party's current state, their remaining spell slots, their action economy? Getting to know the game and getting to know the rules is going to be a big help for this. And I expect more out of a veteran game master or dungeon master than I do out of a newbie. So if you're starting out as a DM, don't freak out. Don't be like, oh God, I have to do all this stuff to make sure my party doesn't die. People are going to be a lot more forgiving if you're doing your best. But there's scaling encounters properly. Schrodinger's orcs is a good example of something I should mention here. It's easy for you as a game master to say, okay, we're going to have a wave of reinforcements arrive on round 3. But it's better if you're like, I think I will have reinforcements if I need them. This is Schrodinger's orcs. They don't exist until the door opens and they boil into the room.
Right.
You don't have to escalate, I guess is the point I'm trying to make here. If you feel like the encounter needs to be escalated, great. You're the DM. You can always make more monsters, wave of reinforcements. But if the encounter is going horribly bad, you could be like, I was going to have reinforcements, but I think those guys are going to go somewhere else. They're just not there.
Yeah, your party doesn't know what you have planned. They don't know if the monster has enrage at like 25% HP. They don't know if there's a reinforcements in the room over. They don't know if it's got 100 less HP than you've supposed it should. There are a lot of ways to adjust the balance of fights mid-fight that are elegant and subtle, that if the party is like really railing and you're like, hey, it's narratively dissatisfying if they get chewed apart here, you can not use everything in the tank. Much like you can give something a little more HP. I know GMs, I don't like recommend this myself, but who literally don't have HP totals for their monsters and they just do it whenever it feels right. That kind of approach can be useful if the party is obviously in danger of dying and you feel like they shouldn't be.
Yeah. I liked, I think I said this before when we had our episode on DMing. We have a whole episode on DMing, by the way. And I think in that episode I said that I like to keep the hand of the GM as invisible as possible because you want the players to feel that sense of accomplishment. You want them to say, okay, we beat this thing and we beat it fairly. I am certainly a guy who has done the vibe HP from time to time.
It's alluring. It's less math.
It is alluring and it's less math. But it is also, there's also something to it when you can say, okay, that dragon you guys just defeated had, 405 hit points. So just so you know, you guys did really, really well. It's a tightrope, and you have to just kind of decide what's going to work best for you. Because one thing I like to say on the show, there is no one true way. There's no good, bad, wrong, fun. If it's fun for you and your group, you guys do it. We're just here to tell you like things that have worked for us, or in games that we've been in.
Yeah, like game design is art, and like any art form, there's no single correct approach, but there are a lot of useful tools, and there are patterns that have been noticed and studied and iterated upon. So one of those patterns leads to TPKs. Some don't.
During my research for this episode, I actually found a technique that I would like to adopt going forward, and that is to make retreat a viable option. And the example that I was thinking about here as I was designing this Black Dragon lair, right? And I was saying, okay, so there's got to be a way in for the dragon who's aquatic, and all of his guys are aquatic, so going underwater makes a lot of sense. But what if there was a land accessible way in or out? And I started thinking like, okay, so if this is going to be a big nasty fight and they want to be able to escape without the dragon being able to pursue them, a person-sized tunnel, first of all, and then have some way to block it. Like, there's a rock fall or a boulder, or it could even be like an ancient portcullis that's rusted in place, but they can pull it down to block off the exit. If you put just a few minutes into preparing an escape route, and as long as you haven't taught the players or they haven't shown up feeling suicidally brave, then having viable options to get out of to get away, to run, makes that a much more likely outcome.
And this, of course, can change the feeling of an encounter. Like when you're in an inescapable pit with like Azathoth, you are in a very different headspace than you are when you have in the back of your head like the way out the whole time. But for an encounter that's likely to be extremely trying, it could be worthwhile to do this just to make sure that there's some way for the characters to pack up and get going if things get a little too dire.
Let me ask you this, Vera. Have you ever DM'd or presided over a TPK, or have you been a part of one?
I have been part of like no full TPK. I've seen a lot of sudden deaths that compound pretty badly. I believe I GM'd for something that was going to be a TPK when I was a kid, and the party never came back. We were playing Call of Cthulhu badly, and a lot of foolish high school decisions were made by the party, and they're like, eh.
Well, that campaign certainly ended, so.
Yeah, I mean.
It was a campaign ender, even if it wasn't a total party kill.
That was one of my initial failed attempts to get a proper game starting. That was an issue of mentality, I would say, because like they were not there to be serious, and I very much was, and I wasn't sure how to get that across, so bad things kept happening.
I will say this. I've been playing role-playing games since 1983, so I've been playing for 43 years this year. That's a long time. That's a lot of campaigns. It's a lot of sessions. And I can tell you, I have seen several TPKs, and I'd say the vast majority of these were completely unexpected. People didn't think it was going to happen until it did happen. So everything we're telling you here about like the preparations you can make and so forth, that doesn't mean it won't happen. You can't, there's very little way to completely avoid it, as long as you are running the game fairly, at least.
Yeah, like every time I've seen players start dropping like flies, the emotion is surprise and then outrage.
Right. So I think that brings us to the next point I was going to make, which is, what do you do when a TPK happens? Now, fortunately, you haven't had to deal with this.
Yeah, I've been spared this, thankfully. I've seen the management happen that takes like to get one person to reinvest in gaming afterward, though, because it can be dramatic. If a couple people die in an encounter, they're upset. It's a different kind of management for like half the party than the full party, though, I'd imagine, because when there's a TPK, you have to decide if you want to start a new game or not.
That's the thing. See, if you manage a TPK well, it can be a very memorable moment. Maybe the conclusion of a campaign doesn't necessarily have to be, but it can be a memorable conclusion. Or it can be to the point where it kills the player's enthusiasm for the game entirely, and they just stop showing up to your Call of Cthulhu game. Vera.
I was 14.
I'm just messing with you. But seriously, though, I think the first thing I would say is, if you have a TPK as a game master, the one thing you can do to help manage it is to stop. Don't rush. Don't rush past it. Stop. Acknowledge the moments. Give it some weight. Acknowledge that weight. Let the scene breathe. Narrate the end very clearly, because nobody wants their death just skimmed over. I mean, I suppose in Call of Cthulhu, there might be like, and then Cthulhu picks you up like a snack and tosses you into his mouth. Like, that might be the end. That might be, I guess depends on tone, right? Like the tone of your game. But if your game is at all a serious character-driven or plot-driven story, that it's worthwhile to acknowledge the moment and let it breathe.
You want it to matter, and that can mean a few things. That can mean just like out of character, taking the time to acknowledge the moment, letting things sit. That can mean in the narrative, having the last acts of the party have some consequence. This works better if their TPK happens during some denouement, some kind of climactic event, rather than a random back alley stabbing. But where possible, it can be satisfying.
The vocabulary on display here is just amazing. I love the fact that we use words like denouement very often. I'm just a big fan of it.
Denouement, face heel turn, verisimilitude, etc., etc.
Very sesquipedalian of you. So the next thing, after you let the scene breathe, let the moment breathe, my recommendation is this: have a debrief. Just ask people, how do they feel? Are they frustrated, energized, devastated, or are they surprisingly okay with it? You will find that everyone has a slightly different reaction. And I think the next question you should ask is whether they feel it was fair or not. If a TPK feels if TPK feels fair, that's one thing. If it feels unfair, then it's probably wise to address that directly and say, okay, well, why does it feel unfair? And here's what I can do to address that issue going forward. Because trust, as I've said before on the show, is almost the most important thing between players and the game master.
Yeah, and when you're asking this, make sure to put your hands in your hips and scowl.
Yeah, give them the mean face. You could also ask them what their preferences are as to how you go on from there, because a long campaign may just want to wrap up. And they may just want to have some questions about, hey, what was actually going on with the prince, or what was the plan of Vecna all along, or something like that. So there may be a moment to provide some closure. But then you need to talk about how to choose your path forward, because there are different options you could take for when everyone in the party dies. Go ahead.
Yeah, those range from ones that happen inside the course of the narrative to the dreaded retcon.
Right. Like the first option is like the campaign just ends. We're done, the story is over, and everyone's okay with that. Cool. No big deal.
Yeah, it is a natural stopping place. Like the characters die, so I guess the story's over. That makes sense, right? Intuitively.
And I should really be clear about this. Not every campaign can be saved.
Yeah.
It's going to depend a lot on your players' personalities and how much investment and various other things. I've had somebody after the end of a campaign come to me and like ask for compensation for all the stuff they bought from Drive-Thru RPG, and I was like, "What? Like actually what?"
Really? They
Yeah,
wanted you to reimburse them.
They wanted reimbursement. Yes,
Did their character die?
I was genuinely shocked. Well, the campaign was over. Long story. I don't want to get fully into it, but I'll just say it was shocking to have that come out. So,
did they think they were renting them?
I don't know.
I'm confused.
The next option is to continue the story with new characters, same world, new characters, because the world doesn't stop existing. The villain's plan may or may not have succeeded. So failure is always an option. If that is on the table for you to be like, okay, yeah, this party died, but there's a new party who can form and join in. And of course, it can all be their twin brothers or siblings or nieces, nephews.
The legendary Party B, who resembles in all ways Party A, except they're slightly younger and have mustaches.
Right. If you've ever seen the Gamers movies, they tend to go deep into this one. This guy plays a bard, and he just gets killed over and over and over again. He just makes a new bard.
A classic.
Then there's option C, which is the retcon. And Vera, what do you think about this?
I think it is in the moment the least narratively satisfying, because it is always a jarring thing to retcon your narrative. There are ways of doing it in universe. You can position the retcon as an ominous nightmare the characters had.
Right. I like to call this the Twilight option. We fought that final battle, but it was all just a vision we had, which is what happens in the Twilight movies when they have their big final battle. It's all just a vision. Yeah.
There's your good writing.
Older fans will remember that season of Dallas that was all a dream, too.
Dallas reference? I find retcons broadly dissatisfying, but sometimes they're kind of important. Like, more often you'll see things retcon that are like little decisions a character makes because their player is like unaware of something they should know in universe, right? Like a conversation, like they say like they make some misstep that obviously they wouldn't, and they're like, oh, well, never mind, I don't want to have done that. And you could be understanding in this case. Retconning an entire 4-hour encounter feels a little different. And it can be jarring to like roll back a character action in the first place.
It says, I went the opposite, PT Jack says. My players are facing deities now, and their greatest kill is Effing Zariel. Her entrance was incredible, and the entire table detonated in a WTF when they managed to do it. That could feel great. And I think if you're going to retcon a TPK, one of the best ways to do it is to frame it or base it or found it upon character choices. And like there's a way in my head, if my current D&D group were to die, and I wanted to bring them back in some fashion, I was to say, like, maybe their Warlock's patron is like, you know what, this is too much fun. I was having too much fun watching you do stuff. And so they all kind of congregate in the afterlife, faced by the Warlock patron, who demands some sort of weird payments, your firstborn child, your favorite memory, something along those lines, and then returns them all to life, either an hour before their fateful encounter, or directly after it, however you want to handle it. But that would be a way that wouldn't totally feel awful, right? You'd be like, oh, okay, my Warlock's patron, he wasn't done playing around with us. It's still not great. Like I'm not expecting that to be a work of art, Vera, but
it's more satisfying than like, okay, well, that didn't happen.
It's way more satisfying than just it didn't happen.
The less actions have consequences, the less immersed people will be. Like the more you divorce the running narrative of the game from what like feels like it matters, the worse it feels. So even let's say a questionable solution can feel better than just saying screw it. Let's run it back.
Well, then there's the option that we brought up earlier, which is the total party capture, or TPC.
Yeah. Rather than executing the heroes, they are captured, they're put in chains, they're bound for some nefarious purpose. And this makes more sense for some encounters than others, right?
As long as the villains are sentient, like they can make choices and are not just beasts, right? Like
not exclusively. Like spiders, for example, might enweb them for storage.
Right.
Some parasitic beasts might capture them to lay their young in the abdomen. Like there's all sorts of nasty stuff you can do. Alien, like in the Xenomorph, they pummel an entire squad of Marines and drag them back to be face hugged. And now suddenly the party wakes up and they have to find a way to get these things out of them with a surgical machine before it's too late.
Right. That's a very good point. Very, very good point. That even bestial creatures can have reasons to capture the enemies. And the decision here, I think, is when you sense it coming as a game master. You're like, okay, everybody's down to their, the party's resources are almost exhausted. Their hit points are getting low, real low, and my bad guys are still in great shape. So this could be a very effective alternative. It can still be, there can still be consequences, right? Because you can lose all your good stuff. You can, you can have scars and prices to pay to get out of the problem. But it does give the party a second chance through through a non-combat means to get out and regroup and come back another day.
Yeah, like just some out, right?
Yeah, it's not a get out of death free card, and it is just a different kind of failure. Usually a teachable moment too.
It can be dissatisfying though, like depending on the consequences of the capture, that's a whole new arc of the campaign they might not like, because if you're captured, you're a little disempowered, right?
Fun fact, very few RPG sessions involve the player characters being captured. It is a very unusual circumstance because it's just not used very often, at least in my experience. And that's the novelty of being captured can actually lead to some really interesting role-playing opportunities simply because it's not something you run into very often.
But some people will chafe at being put in a prison,
Some people will, yeah. There's always one or two who are like, man.
But it can like really run into the fantasy people have, right? Like it depends on the extent of the consequence, the tone of it, what their characters are like. They might not want to see their barbarian in that kind of position for like 4 sessions.
Well, yeah, if you're going to do a TPC as opposed to TPK, don't stretch it out. 1 session, 2 at the most, please. Please, I'm begging you. Novelty is fun, but it only goes so far.
We got a super chat from P2 Jack.
Oh, this guy's great. Welcome, P2 Jack. Thank you for joining us. I should really point out that super chats are the best way to keep the channel going. Directly impacts our ability to create more content for you. So we are always grateful to everyone who decides to support us with the super chat.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Why don't you read this one?
Yeah, a player retconned a TPK by luckily drawing the Fates card from the deck of many things. Yep, gave it to him. They erased the event that led to it. Oh yeah, well, that's part of what makes the deck a really fun option. Is there are a couple of tools in there that can avert like total disaster, right?
Well,
if you're already fucked, like you might as well pull for the wish.
There you go.
I'm saying. Like,
yes, that's the one time I would say deck of many things is a great idea. Is if you are try to retcon a TPK because I have seen campaigns end with the deck of many things.
Well, yeah, it can cause a TPK also.
It literally can. It literally can. It's an item I am extremely wary of deploying into a D&D game. I'll just be very clear about that.
The deck giveth, the deck taketh away.
Oh my god! I even have the crazy box set they released with the actual cards, and I was thinking, man, I should really use these. They've been sitting up here for years.
It's the kind of thing where you need the party out of character to understand how it should be used, and the answer is when you're really desperate. Like, the problem with the deck is that it will tempt people to use it when they're bored, which will lead to a very exciting outcome, inevitably.
That's true. Then there's the last option, which is called the curtain drop. And that's when a TPK is clearly inevitable. And the grind towards defeat is going to damage everyone's calm. If you've ever been in a situation where you're like, oh my God, we are not going to win this, and you don't want to spend the next 90 minutes figuring out that you're not going to win this, the curtain drop is a technique the Game Master can use to sort of narrate a fade to black, where the TPK is absolutely going to happen and everyone gets that. But rather than going through all the die rolling, you're just like, okay, we're gonna gracefully drop the curtain on this play and move on to something else.
It's why some people find chess miserable. Yeah, exactly. Like being edged out gradually over time when the outcome's obvious. It can be rough. It can be rough.
Good point, Mickey Stopwatch. Thank you. Yeah, so this the idea here is that you can fade to black before the final deaths are fully played out, but it still gives you the chance, if you want, to save the party. You know, maybe there's a rescue group or a new set of adventurers follows up. But it can also help preserve momentum and avoids the demoralizing slog of watching everyone die one by one.
Yeah, when you want to talk about party morale, that can be a real killer. Haha.
In this case, a curtain drop can sort of preserve a sense of mystery, like who survived or what happened. You know, how did I die exactly? And that can change the vibe from, you know, frustrated rage to more thoughtful introspection of like, how do I want to close the curtain on this particular character? If the Game Master gives you an opportunity to choose, for example, how you die in that final battle. Maybe you're holding the gate at Minas Tirith against the hordes of orcs, for example.
Yeah, and theoretically, you can lead this sort of more narrative conclusion into a capture, into various ways of escape. There's things you can do to guide the party here, depending on how comfortable you are ushering them that kind of way. When you take things out of the combat and into narrative time, it might drive home, hey, we should get out of here. And that can lead them to make better choices, potentially, once they're no longer like walked into the combat mindset.
I love how you're like, make better choices, people.
Well, that could be what happens. Yeah.
Like, no, I get it. It's funny. That's all.
Some TPKs and a lot of TPKs happen because of horrible circumstances, just like bad fortune, unseen errors, and so on. But once they start happening, you have to, like, if you want to survive at all, you have to make choices that will get you out of the situation, that will lessen the damage, that'll let you carry on somehow. And narrative time can encourage that, because no longer you walked in the mentality of we're doing combat. Combat's over.
Yeah, combat creates expectations of ongoing opportunities, but it also locks you into a certain mindset. Speaking of mindset, speaking of philosophy in general, I will posit you this question, Vera. Should we prevent TPKs?
Could we or should we?
Should we?
It depends. You need consequences for heroism, right? You need the possibility of death for it to matter that you lived. We're getting into like the big philosophy now. the theoretically ephemeral nature of your character is a big part of what makes it satisfying to play them, because you're rewarded for succeeding. You're rewarded for being intelligent, for being brave, for overcoming obstacles. If you can't die and you can't fail, the obstacles mean nothing. So I would say it should always be possible to fail, right? And that failure should have consequences, and that in a lot of cases, those consequences should be up to and including death. However, if you're running for little Timmy and his friends at their 4th grade birthday party, maybe you shouldn't have the Minotaurs start eating all of their skulls.
Oh, wow. This
right?
sounds like a very personal story. Did you
Look,
run a game for
little
a bunch
kids
of
get excited about tabletop games, and they you need to make it work somehow. So.
I agree with you definitely in the broad strokes. I agree with you. And this is a school of thought called the consequence school. And in this style of thinking, TPKs are legitimate and possibly even necessary as a part of the game. Because without the credible threat of failure, victories feel unearned. That's something I hate. I hate getting a victory that I feel I didn't earn. The world loses verisimilitude. I'm doing the title drop now.
Yeah, like I would say even if you plan to do everything in your power to prevent the TPK, it should be something that feels possible.
TPKs from this year are not failures of the game master. They're just the game working as intended. Now this, I'm going to admit, this is a bias that I have because it was a philosophy that dominated the early editions of Dungeons & Dragons. So I grew up with this. It is a bias that I have. So I think it's fair. It's only fair that if Vera and I are both on one side of the argument, though, that we talk about the other side at least a little bit, even if it's not one that we prefer to use. The other style is the narrative school. There's the consequence school and the narrative school. The narrative school says that TPKs are primarily a problem of campaign continuity. That's long-form campaigns where the players are invested, especially if they've invested like months or years. We're talking long-term campaigns here. If they've invested that much time in their characters and stories, then the TPK severs the narrative thread in ways that are uniquely damaging, more so than individual character deaths, because you're getting rid of all the people that the characters talked to and related to and built their character development on, right? So from this view, the game master's role is their purpose is to create meaningful challenge and danger while preserving the conditions for good storytelling, which sometimes means bending the rules to avoid abrupt, unsatisfying ends. And I can certainly sympathize with all of those points.
Well, I would describe myself as primarily someone invested in the narrative, right? I just, I feel that the narrative takes on more meaning when there is that lingering threat. And like, even as someone who wants to prevent a TPK, no matter what, you should have that mentality of it's very possible for them to get themselves in a situation where everyone dies. Like I think it lends more weight to what you're doing as a GM to envision worlds where that can happen.
Right. I think the goal. So we have given you a few tools in this episode to telegraph, and to communicate, or are you sure questions. There are tools you have as a game master in your pocket to try and head off TPKs at the pass. And I think most modern DMs sit somewhere between those two schools where they're like, okay, we need to have meaningful risks. But at the same time, we want to try and communicate clearly when you're about to encounter something that is very dangerous for your group. And I again, this is my bias showing, but I do believe that the world feels more alive if you have encounters, if encounters are possible between your party and something that you can't possibly beat. Okay.
Yeah, or at least if it feels that way, because ultimately all of this lives in the mind of the player, and that is a effect you can accomplish without putting them in as much danger as it might appear. But you have to be very careful with managing that, because if it's obvious after a while, there's no consequences to doing the stupidest thing possible. Well, they'll remember that and they'll keep doing it.
So I think my best compromise here is to make sure that everyone understands TPKs can happen, but make sure I give as many warning signs as possible before they ignore them, and make sure that if there is a defeat, that it somehow serves the story. So that way, if the TPK happens, it doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere, and it's not going to leave everyone emotionally devastated. That's, I think, the best threading of the needle, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that failing forward is an ideal approach for tabletop game design in general. I think that failing forward from the entire party, failing in the most catastrophic way possible, is a challenge in this regard, but certainly worthwhile, because otherwise the narrative is over entirely. um, which again can be appropriate sometimes, but I think that's a winning mentality, because you want stakes, you want things to matter, you want to have fun at the table, right? Like there's a third philosophy toward TPKs we haven't talked about, which is the adversarial one, where it's the desired outcome of the GM, but that doesn't come up a
Oh,
lot because it's not fun. Uh, the legendary punitive TPK.
so I'll say this: there is a certain amount of cachet from the title Killer GM. Okay, and that cachet is both good and bad. It's good in that people will be like, "Oh, you're a killer GM," and that attracts a certain type of person who wants to prove themselves. That is a little more invested. I often find in the game if they're feeling like it's a challenge they can rise to, right? But the flip side of the cachet of being a killer GM is that there are a lot of new players and players who get over emotionally invested, let's say, who will probably avoid your table and probably be like, "Oh, you're a killer GM. I don't want to play with you. That means you're just going to kill my character whenever you feel like it," whether or not that's true.
Well, the killer GM can be a couple kinds of person, right? You could have the sadist who just wants to make people upset and bait them in and like kill their character, or you can have the adversarial but constructive GM who writes encounters that are likely to kill you, and if you play perfectly, they might not. And they want to see the limits of the game as a war game, which I would say is perhaps a little misguided, but can create fun if people are there for that kind of experience.
Right. Again, there's no one true way, but I think you did illustrate. I was like, that would definitely be a red flag in my mind if the game master is like, I'm just so excited to test out this new tactical problem that I want you to solve.
Yeah, good luck, buddy.
I've met people who are like that. Do you know people who are game masters who are like that?
Oh yeah, I know. Like what one TPK that I was part of that got like called because one of the players got so upset. I guess it was like a curtain call, much in the way that a curtain can fall, knocked over. Uh, we were playing, I think Lancer, and the encounter was divided by this like hard light screen that cut off the squishiest members of the party who were then ambushed, and like one of the people who was victim to this got so upset by it that they were just like really it was not a good vibe at the table, because it had not been clear whatsoever that this was the level of difficulty the campaign would be. It was our first encounter combat
Oh,
wise, so
oh,
people were learning their systems and whatnot, and it was generally a bad time actually.
yeah. God, I mean, just, just the idea that it was your first one, your first encounter. I was like, oh shit, it's like that's a bad idea. Yikes.
Yeah, and like there are systems that are perfectly workable to run as war games, and Lancer is arguably one of them. But but uh, no one had really played with these systems too well, and it was pretty brutal and brought a somewhat rapid end to things happening, or at least felt like it was.
Yeah, gosh, ouch. I
Yeah, it was the kind of battlefield defining super move that was hard to predict, that was super consequential, that led to a lack of agency because people were getting pummeled at their worst range without any recourse. So, ugh.
yeah, I don't like that at all. I'll be very clear. That would definitely be a feel bad for me.
Well, I didn't feel great about it myself, but there was some real upset.
Speaking of being upset, I think the emotional and social dynamics of TPK are worth discussing.
Oh yeah,
because I think we all have an attachment to players. That players have attachments to their characters. Is what I'm trying to say. And I think there's grief. There's actual grief when your character dies, if you're invested in them.
Well, yeah, like even when a campaign ends, I found out that one of my games had been canceled like last month, I think, and I was beside myself. It's the most upset I've been in a long time.
Really?
Oh yeah.
What happened?
Just we'd been on hiatus, and one of the players just didn't want to come back to it, and he was so central to the narrative and to the structure of the party that it was like, all right, are we going to run this back at all? And the answer was no, and it was heartbreaking.
That is awful. That has happened to me before, where just the one key member just can't make it, and that's it. And it feels terrible.
Yeah.
But let's see. I think so. Most role-playing games are story-forward games. They are games where the story is a big part of what you're trying to do, and that includes modern D&D. I think the players are actively encouraged to invest deeply into their characters. This can be everything from the choices they make in character creation, like the feats or the spells that they pick, all the way through to backstories that they create or connections they make at session 0, detailing their character sheets with all of their bonds, ideals, and flaws. And then you get into if it's a longer game, you're talking about multi-session arcs that your character gets involved in. This creates a level of emotional attachment. And to be clear, this is something that wasn't a big deal back in the 70s and 80s. Okay, so this is a last 30 years as opposed to last 40 years.
Well, yeah, one time it was like, hey, this is my little pawn. He's got these hirelings. Here's the character that his will goes to when he dies.
So, well, yeah, that literally was part of it. And when you're invested in your character, TPKs erase all of that investment. It can create a reaction that's very disproportionate to what you might expect from just sitting around and playing a game with your friends, which is real grief. And it follows a recognizable pattern. Most players that I've seen, including myself, they start with shock. Did that just really happen? Did we all just die? Followed by reactions that depend on your level of attachment and your individual personality. Some people get energetic. You're like, wow, that was amazing. It's exactly what I wanted. Out of my character's death, I got to do something cool. Or maybe I was like, I had a character in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay who was he was a playwright. And part of my goal in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was to die in a very memorable moment, but one that felt very Warhammer. And I got squished to death underneath the foot of a fen beast in the swamp, literally drowning in mud, only a few inches deep. And I was like, now this is Warhammer, baby. Like I was fired up. I was like, this is exactly what I wanted for a character death.
That is Warhammer.
So that was, to me, that was narratively satisfying. But other people can experience loss. They can, if the character represented some real personal exploration for them, or had story threads that'll never be resolved, that is something that they'll sit there and mourn. And if you're watching another character die, that can actually be more negative than actually having your character die sometimes, depending on the circumstances. Especially if that player feels responsible because he's the guy who went and opened the door in the middle of the fight.
Yeah,
this guy right here, by the way.
I see. We've seen and discussed in the past how like role playing can be a cool way for people to sort of explore their personality and feel out social scenarios and stuff, which can lead to a lot of personal attachment. And this is true like in the tabletop club at the school I teach at. And if that character, who's like the self-insert through which they're trying to find their confidence, you're like be a different kind of person, is suddenly murdered, that can be upsetting.
It can honestly be a serious blow. I remember that character that died twice that I was talking about.
Yeah.
In the party that everyone died several times. The first time my character died was very early in that campaign, and I remember just picking up my character sheet and feeling that cold pit in my stomach and thinking, man, I was really liking this game, and now I have to leave. And I really hated it because it felt like I was going to get excluded from something that all my friends are going to be part of. So yeah, there's a little FOMO there. But on top of that,
bitter pill.
On top of that, I was like, man, I made some bad choices tonight. And I was just aching for a really good long-term campaign. So when I discovered that my character's death was not in fact permanent and I was going to be able to come back and rejoin the game, it actually is like a huge relief. It was like, oh, thank God. Like, I'm not just done with this game, because I didn't want to be.
Yeah, and having like some kind of out can be useful there. I will note that the consequences of those outs can be different. Like, I know somebody who, after a almost TPK, had their character brought back as like an animate undead sort of, and they found that like very unpleasant after a while. They really didn't like it, and it affected their enthusiasm for the game and sort of their mental state in general. Like,
yeah, timing is also a big part here, because if you have a TPK that happens within the final 20 minutes of a 4-hour session, it's going to be a little easier to absorb. Whereas if it happens in the first 20 minutes, if things get really awkward, very demoralizing. You drove 30 minutes to get to this guy's basement to play D&D, and you're dead in the first 20 minutes.
You know? Yeah, like, now what?
Right? It's a very different. So timing is actually a big part of how the TPK can land. So one way to give people closure on a TPK is eulogies, right? Instead of pivoting to what happens next, this is what I was talking about earlier about, like, sort of letting the moment breathe, and then one of the options being that curtain drop, right? The curtain drop option is a great way to say, okay, we can now eulogize all of our characters. We can even have NPCs remember things about our characters and just talk about like who they were, and give everybody a chance to basically have a little funeral.
Doing that for 3 hours sounds rough if you have like a deal at the start of the game. Like, oh my God.
I don't think I'd let it go for 3 hours, but certainly 60 minutes isn't that unreasonable. It can convert grief into something that feels more earned and honored, is the reason I was going to bring it up.
Yeah, and you want people to feel like what they've done matters, right? Like, ideally, actions have consequences, and that can include getting in deep trouble and dying, but you want them to feel as if that's not the thing that defines their entire character, right?
Yeah, and even like the things that we talked about that make people freak out, like the idea of all the unfulfilled character arcs. If you handle that correctly in a eulogy or funeral type format, it can be energizing. It can be more like, okay, here's all the things that I wanted to do and never got the chance to do. There's a house rule that I follow, and I think a lot of people follow, and that's if your character dies in combat, you get basically a lot more leeway on free action talking during your final round.
Excellent.
You get to say something really big and cool and important right before you croak. And I always felt like that was a really good way to sort of head some of this off at the pass, is just to have just be a little more lenient with the action economy, I guess, for someone who's absolutely dying, and give them a chance to say, even if they're dead, even if they're 0 hit points right away, be like, cool, what are your last words?
Like, it's pretty dark with a TPK though. Like, the entire party is like making eye contact as the light comes out of their eyes. It's like a horror show.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those ways to deal with the emotional impact. Is what I'm saying. Is to have that some opportunity for closure, even if it's just our ghosts lingering, like Obi-Wan's ghost after he gets cut down by Vader. Just being around long enough to say a few lines of dialogue before you vanish off into the distance can change the whole thing from being super painful to being more of a farewell.
Yeah, but the vibe would change if it was Obi-Wan's ghost presiding over them, and then Han Solo pops up, then Luke's ghost pops up, then C-3PO's ghost pops up, and they're like, well, shit, now what?
I mean, you're right. But even, I guess I'm saying is even if they can only say those final words to each other, it's still something.
Yeah.
I realize that's not a perfect solution or even a particularly good option, but it's something.
In a lot of tonal ranges of game, that is preferable to having the life suddenly crushed from them and narrating their eyes popping out of their head as they explode, right?
Well, if it's Warhammer, I'd probably be actually more okay with that too. Like,
depends on the tone.
Right. Little George Miller extreme close up on my face as I get destroyed. It's not terrible.
Don't do that in the Digimon RPG.
No, God, no. Oh, Jesus. My Little Pony, and now we're as if directed by David Cronenberg. Oh my God. So I think, honestly, I would say this. I think if you have a fair and well telegraphed TPK, that actually can strengthen trust rather than damaging it.
Yeah, because it reinforces that there are consequences to actions. It makes them feel like the world kind of matters. It does a lot to solidify that idea that, hey, maybe this matters what I'm doing. Maybe there are ways that I can save myself or my friends. It can be bitter, but it makes them feel like their choices are relevant, right?
Well, it can validate that the game has real stakes, and it can make it to where everyone understands the game master is not going to protect you artificially. It confirms that the game world is real in the sense that matters, in that your choices have impact, and the game master is going to adjudicate those fairly. On the other hand, an unfair TPK will often be a campaign ender, because that if the TPK comes along without any warning, or if it's very mechanically dubious, or if it just feels like you're out to get them, that's going to damage the trust, and that can end your group.
Mechanically dubious can here also be heard as bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm translating.
No, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. I would be probably one of the first people say, man, that was some bullshit.
Well, if it feels like it was bullshit, that sure does damage us. Like, what was the point of this exercise? Are you torturing us? Like, is this funny to you, Mr. GM? I'm sorry.
Well, I got to admit, those assassins from a Descent into Avernus that can turn invisible and are, again, like sent against a second level party who doesn't have a lot of options for invisible enemies, that felt like some goddamn bullshit. That was deeply mechanically dubious to my mind.
What if our first encounter was invisible enemies that cast Hold Person?
Right.
That sounds cool.
Oh God, no.
Wow, neat.
Oh my God.
This too is game design.
It is. It absolutely is. So that's a type of trust called a functional trust. It's players trusting that the game master will exercise their power in good faith, following the rules that everyone follows in the game, and pursuing the table's collective enjoyment over their own agenda. That is the goal. That's my ideal. That's how I want my players to see me, as that guy. So,
yeah, like it does vary based on, like, if everyone's played a Leo mod in the Digimon game, maybe you do have like some cool like beating out in the snow thing. I think that would work. I think that's more satisfying than just pulping all of them with like the giant metal Mamamon fist, though. Like we want to have this feel like dramatic, right?
You know what's hilarious is my co-host on Lorebeards 40K is a Yu-Gi-Oh fan. So I'm
Oh,
getting
yeah.
I'm getting all the Digimon references from you, and I get all the Yu-Gi-Oh references from her. So it's just hilarious. It's a fun thing I noticed.
I understand the first 3 seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! And beyond that, I'm confused. I got through card games on motorcycles.
Well, I don't know a lot about Digimon, but I do know that they are digital monsters and that they are the champions. And that's about
That's
all I
true.
can tell you.
They're fighting to save a digital world.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Dun, 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 dun. Anyway.
incredibly earworm theme song for Digimon.
Well, like, there's an example of TPKs being sort of avoided by the setting. Like, we're talking about tone. Your Digimon gets, like, squished in a pulp and it de-reses into data that'll then coalesce into an egg that you can then raise again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same Digimon, just smaller now.
This is like functional immortality in a way.
Yeah, which makes it functional immortality.
Functional.
Yeah, it has good feng shui. Anyway, this is a narratively supported system that makes it less likely you'll have a TPK, because if the Digimon will get splatted, the little trainers run off, the tamers bail, they go out of there and they take their eggs and go home and cry and raise them again and hug their cute little beans, because of course when they die and they turn into eggs and they hatch, they're cute little bean that's very marketable plushy shape, and they can cry it all out and reset and start over. Warhammer is not like this.
No. Nestor Vitumber says, in my group, we have a player who sacrificed himself 3 times to avoid a TPK. Each new character he creates is a relative of the previous one. We're witnessing the tragic downfall of a dynasty. Oh, that is some good comment there, bro. That is awesome.
Hell yeah.
Now, TPKs aren't just rough on the players. They can be rough on the Game Master as well, because a TPK puts the Game Master, or the Dungeon Master, under enormous stress. The Game Master, he is simultaneously a referee, a collaborative storyteller, and the person responsible for the encounter that just killed everyone. Okay? And that power differential means that the Game Master role is the one that controls all the information, all the opposition, and ultimately all the outcomes. And in any TPK situation, one of the first things that's going to happen is that there's going to be that question from the player characters. Did you mean for this to happen?
Why have you done this to me personally?
Right. That is going to be a question. So that's why, one of the reasons why I'm always emphasizing trust, the bond of trust, is because it is impactful on everyone at the table. And so if you have that functional trust, if you have a fair and well-telegraphed TPK, that's probably not the end for your gaming group. It may not even be the end for that campaign. It might just be a really fun, cool story that you tell later on a podcast that you're hosting.
What Ross is saying is you should teach your players to fear you.
Killer Jim! Killer Jim!
There is a social contract, right? We talked about this during session 0, right?
Right, and this is why I'm a big proponent of rolling all your dice in the open too, is because that's a good way to build trust.
Yeah, they know you aren't like maliciously calling out fake criticals to whittle down their cool hero and turn him into a bleeding nugget. Like they know that your goal is to simulate chance and the chills and spills of combat, right?
Right. So I would even argue that rolling dice in the open is even more important if you're doing a big fight that could be a TPK. If you're at all concerned that a TPK is coming, start rolling your dice in the open. Just do it. It's going to be better all around. Yeah, have some transparency about the encounter design. You know, if you're the game master and a TPK happens, it's okay for you to be like, listen, you guys have been just crushing everything I've sent your way, so I maybe adjusted a little too far. Or, you know, just communicate, because you don't want that question of were you trying to kill us to be yes. You don't want people walking away from the table thinking you're out there to destroy their fun and give them a really bad time. What you want, ultimately, what you want is you want people to think you were fair and that you did it right. That if they died, they died because of the dice, because of the encounter, because of their choices, not because you were out to get them. That's the worst possible result of TPK. Right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. You don't want the feeling they get to be like, wow, this sucked so bad. I don't want to do anything like this again.
There have been people who have never played another role-playing game in their life. You can convert people who like role-playing games to people who will never play them again. That's true. Obviously, TPKs are very different if you are doing a one-shot as opposed to doing a campaign. The stakes are different. The failures are a little different. And experimentation, like let's say we're going to, hey, let's try out Warhammer. Let's try out Dungeon Crawl Classics, or an OSR game. Creates a different set of expectations. And again, it's probably fine for a TPK if you're doing a one-shot, especially if there's a game like Call of Cthulhu, where this is a very logical and reasonable outcome.
Yeah, it's thematic. Mm-hmm. Or like certain kinds of party lend themselves well to TPKs. You're playing Warhammer. We're using the rat books. All right, here's our group of Skaven. They're going to kill each other. Like, great. Good outcome.
I ran a game for several years that did not result in a TPK, but I was always concerned that it was. It was a horror game. And I was leaning deep into the Call of Cthulhu feel. And I was leaning deep into cosmic horror. I was leaning deep into trying to build that sense of dread. We should do a whole episode on horror and RPGs. It's something I'm fascinated with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had a player come up to me and say, what happens if my character dies? He was a guy who has almost exclusively played superhero role-playing games prior to this. And he said, I'm really invested in this character. I don't want him to just die like that. I want to negotiate with you so that if I get killed, I have some kind of cool out. I have a big heroic moment. And this was a moment for me as a game master where I had to really think hard. And I ended up answering him with, I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. I said, I think this is a horror game and I'm not trying to kill you, but you should know that one of the things that you, when playing a horror game, is that anyone can die at any time, and it won't necessarily be a heroic death.
Yeah, and even if that's not true, you should tell them that.
Well, I felt good that I was communicating it clearly, right?
Right.
And I'll point out very strongly, I never managed to kill any player character in that particular campaign. I tried hard. I tried real hard. It just never happened.
Killer GM.
Let's just say I didn't pull any punches. And it was one of our most favorite role-playing games of all time. Like a friend of mine has written an article about it called that. So, it was obvious. It was a very successful game. We all had a great time at the end. And I never had to do a TPK, but I was willing to. I was ready to. And I had to have that conversation. So, yeah, it depends a lot on what kind of game it is. Is it a horror game? Is it a humor game? Is it an action hero game? Is it a superhero game? There are way different expectations for all of those things. If we're playing Prowlers of Paragons, which is a superhero game, and you have come to me and said, hey, this is like that old Jim Steranko era Avengers comics, I'm not going to expect to get killed. I'm going to be like, okay, I'll probably just get captured by the bad guys, or, I'll get knocked out and wake up under a pile of rubble, or, I'm certainly not expecting to get, a gory, messy end. But if we're playing Warhammer, that's a very different subject. It's far more likely that I will go through a gory, messy end than I will end up some sort of celebrated hero.
Right.
What are people? So, like, let's talk about a handful of very popular games right now, other than D&D. Like, what are some ones that you would say are very popular in your area?
Pathfinder. Pathfinder's one. Warhammer's another.
Right.
Vampire.
There we go. So Vampire is one where you don't necessarily expect to die.
Because you're immortal.
To a degree, yeah. Obviously, the final death is possible. Vampire is one of those situations where I have been in campaigns where death was very rare, and I've been in campaigns where it was very, very likely. So that's when I would want to have a conversation for sure. And I think almost any game you're going to want to have that conversation in session 0. But
Right.
if we're playing, let's say we're playing Iron Claw, or we're going to play Paranoia, or we're going to play, Marvel superheroes. Those are all 3 very different games. None of those games have a high death quotient, right? As opposed to, say, Delta Green or Cyberpunk.
Yeah, like in a Marvel game, it's like the 10th Resurrection arc versus Cyberpunk, where I really want to stay at your house starts playing, and it becomes a very different kind of session. So,
oh no, God, why did you bring that up?
It's all about tonality, right?
Oh my God! So I watched the Edge Runners show, and then I played Cyberpunk 2077, and I got to tell you, I killed the absolute shit out of Adam Smasher, and I was like, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for you.
Oh man,
that is great. I did see a comment here. Here we go. Morbid Mind, welcome Morbid Mind. He says, in Dark Heresy, you eat a crit and your head explodes in the bad roll. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm to blame for a lot of that. Absolutely.
it sure gets the tone across, right?
For sure. Oh, Humblewood. Humblewood's a game where I wouldn't expect to die very often, for example.
Yeah, cozy kind of games like that are stylistically soft. Pokeroll, the Pokemon RPG that I play, there's a system for lethal damage. You don't expect it to be used often, and if it is used, you expect it to be a tense scenario you can probably navigate out of usually, because the tone of the game isn't like, oh my God, it's carnage usually.
There's also some games that are mechanically built to where final deaths are very difficult. I would say Savage Worlds is a game where it's actually quite difficult to die. First, you have to get wounded, and then you have to fail your soak roll. And typically, you have to get wounded more than once. I mean, it is possible to take a big enough hit that you die at once, but the odds are astronomical in most cases. And then, so let's say you have taken all of your wounds and failed all of your rolls to soak. Then you are incapacitated, and there's a table that you roll on to see what happens. And on that table, death is a fairly unlikely event. So Savage Worlds is one of those games where you go through a lot of different steps before you get to, and now I'm dead, as opposed to, say, D&D, which is just a question of, are you at 0 hit points or not?
Yep.
So, and then there's the death saves in D&D 5th edition, for example. And we've talked about all the resurrection and raised dead things as well. So D&D and Pathfinder are basically essentially the same. I consider them essentially the same game because they have the same options. They have the same general expectations. I know that 2E and 5E are different things for Pathfinder 2E versus D&D 5E, but they're so similar that the Venn diagram was almost an overlap.
Yeah, the design concept is similar.
Okay. What about, we talked about like a one shot is just not going to be that big of a deal, right? Because it's whatever. You're playing a one shot. Uh-huh. It's very rare to see people get invested into one shots, although it has happened.
Well, the 20 minutes in thing still sucks. We sit down and suddenly the game's over after like 15. There's nothing to even talk about. How do you mourn these guys? You don't know who they are.
Well, have you heard of a game called 10 Candles?
I have not heard of 10 Camels.
Candles, like a candlestick.
No.
Okay. So 10 Candles is a game where you have these little tea lights that you know what a tea light is. It's basically a little metal container with a roughly inch thick candle that you light. And it's probably not that thick, honestly. But anyway, the point is that they're small candles, and they will gutter and they will go out. And the idea of 10 Candles is that it's a game that's played in one shot, where you and your group will play until all of the candles go out, and when the final candle goes out, all of your characters are dead. So it's a game that gets progressively darker over time, and it always ends in a TPK.
What if somebody sneezes?
I mean, I think the candles have to go out naturally. I haven't played it.
These are natural.
To be clear, I have not played it. But it is a game about tragedy. It is a game about it is horror, but it's more about collaborative storytelling, and it's more about being in a world where darkness has fallen and monsters threaten your existence. Which, I mean, that's almost all RPGs in many ways. But the unique mechanic is the candles that are the timer and the central element of the gameplay. And in that kind of encounter, in that kind of one shot, I could see myself getting very invested, because if you change the environments of the experience to where it becomes more intimate and becomes more, I don't want to say meaningful, but it feels meaningful. Like it's just significance, right? There's a weight attached to that one shot that doesn't exist in many other one shots.
Well, yeah, because instead of playing characters who you aren't like invested in and just doing your thing, you are struggling against the inevitable explicitly. Like you're suddenly thrust into this scenario where you can see doom and you're trying to delay it, and that changes the vibe a lot from a sort of non-committal, otherwise standard session to something.
Yeah, so I guess I'm saying one shots can be something that a TPK can be a lot more meaningful if it's immersive enough, if it grabs you and pulls you in, you know. But more often than not, when you're talking about TPKs, you're talking about campaigns. You're talking about something more akin to like a novel or a television series that's built over months or even years of weekly, bi-weekly play. God, I would love to be in a game that ran every week. It's been so long. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm glad my Pokemon game started up again to be dying 1,000 deaths of the Warhammer campaign. Not to rub it in, sorry.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And campaigns build that immersion through character development and through dozens of different scenes, history moments, forging relationships with different NPCs. A TPK in this context is not just an ending. It's often a termination of a story that was years away, often, or months away from any kind of conclusion. And that means the investment of everyone is at stake, including the game master. Like a game master for 10 Candles is not necessarily as invested as the players. But a game master in a months or years long campaign can be deeply invested. They can also feel like a TPK cut off something very precious that was just about to take flight. So the same thing that can be a delightful surprise in a one shot can be a genuine loss in a campaign. And I just want to illustrate the differences here, because TPKs are not always what you think they are, I guess is what I'm trying to get across. Now, you mentioned earlier in the show that there is such a thing as an effective TPK.
Yeah, like where the party is so thoroughly dashed, like they're the whole thing is ruined, either because certain important characters are dead and there's no way to recover it, or because their vessel, their ship they need, their objective is scuttled, and it seems very hard to continue. Like the campaign is so derailed that might as well be over because the party is no longer effective, right? And there's a lot of possible ways this can happen if some mission critical thing is thoroughly failed, which is often hard to do, or if they're put in a scenario where they're like trapped extra dimensionally and they would need some kind of hand of God to get out. Like there's a lot of ways this can happen. I've like the character who held the entire narrative together is dead and just gone. And it's like hard to see a way to continue. Things that effectively make the party disintegrate or no longer able to continue their task.
And there is such a thing as killing a concept as opposed to killing the character. Good example of this, in my opinion, is in the Game of Thrones television series and books. Jaime Lannister, who is one of the most amazing swordsmen in all the Seven Kingdoms, he loses a hand, and that's it. That's he's no longer an amazing swordsman, And he has to like deal with that, right? And that's his story. That's like what makes that part compelling. Although Jamie is an awful, awful person, it makes you want to read more about him when he loses his hand and is struggling to overcome this handicap. And I think if you are playing a certain type of character, a amputation can absolutely mean that this character is ruined and I never want to see him again.
Yeah,
even if they're not technically dead.
If you're a certain type of player, you might find that like really disheartening, just like beyond unacceptable. That can happen.
There's a lot of ways this can occur in a game. There can be curses. There can be, well, obviously amputations that we've already discussed, but there could be things like a massive shift in. This can even be something like a new edition that comes out and it just absolutely destroys your class, for example. But it's never happened, right? Thankfully, it's never happened.
Mm.
I could hear that expression. I didn't need to see it. What are some other examples you could think of a death of a concept?
There are out of game reasons it could happen. A notorious example is if you have characters who are dating because their players are dating and then they break up, and that concept of these paired characters is no longer viable, and it creates a weird vibe at the table, and that, well, not a TPK, is kind of effectively one sometimes.
Yeah, infamously, Shadowrun has character concepts like the Rigger, who's all about vehicles, or the Decker, who has this one computer that is really awesome. And there are cases where all your cars get blown up or your cyber deck gets stolen. And now you're like, well, now what do I do? Because I invested all these skill points and stuff that I literally can't do anything with now, right?
Yeah, and your character doesn't do anything now because they're built around an item they don't have.
Exactly. Now, I mean, Shadowrun is not alone, but it is like the first one that came to mind is like that is the end of that concept. That character is basically dead. In the Knights at the Dinner Table comic, there's a character called Dave who wields a +12 Hackmaster sword. He has built his entire personality around this. Like it's such a rare item that he just happens to have. And if he ever loses that sword or it's separated from his character, he just turns into this zombie at the table, just like he doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to engage. That's the one thing that made that character interesting to him, right? And that can be true. It can be like a holy adventure for a paladin. It can be your cyber deck. It can be your car. It can be lots of different things. Famously in Rifts, for example, you can play a character called a Juicer, and they're enhanced by combat drugs that's administered through a certain system. And in the lore of Rifts, they always burn out after a certain time, and they either die in battle or they become an ex-juicer who can never be a juicer again because their drugs just screw up their system that badly. So there could be a point where you just don't have the ability to be that class anymore, right?
You're like a paladin who breaks their oath, right?
Oh yeah, that happened to me. Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, in Baldur's Gate 3, it fucking sucks because it happens for reasons that are really weird. Like, what do you mean attacking these goblins who are roasting dwarf flesh from their captives is like attacking an innocent? No, the fuck they're not.
Right, but yeah, so I feel the pain of being a paladin who's broken his oath, and now you're questioning like the whole point of being here at this table.
Yeah, because like in all of these cases, right, there's narrative arcs that can sort of get past it, like find a new way of being, but maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe that's not what you signed up for, and it sucks.
Got a comment here from Nestor Vitzumber says, we have some very veteran characters who've accumulated large amounts of shadow, I guess that's a game term, from watching their companions fall. Oh, that's the One Ring. That's from, okay. The Free League, the One Ring, I think. I would really like to learn more about how that mechanic works. Actually, it's pretty cool.
The idea that like a character who survives a lot of death and sees a lot of war becomes hollowed out over time, I find very compelling. I think that's an interesting system mechanically.
Delta Green.
Heavy.
Let's play.
Though.
Let's go play some Delta Green. We'll get right into that.
Yeah, all right.
Because Delta Green, you are almost always damaged goods.
Yippee, the horrors of war.
Yippee. Oh, you kill me here. I love it. Oh my gosh. So historically, D&D, the design culture back in the 70s certainly was where character death was expected. It was frequent, and it was generally considered morally neutral. It was just a thing that happened in the game because D&D originally was a war game called Chainmail. That's where a lot of this stuff was born. And the original D&D games, I would say up through the early 80s, certainly, dungeons were like a puzzle to be solved, not a story to be told. Characters were basically disposable. And there are games from today where that's still true. Like Dungeon Crawl Classics has the character funnel, where you sit down and you play, 10 different characters, and the one that makes it to the end is the guy you play from then on.
There you have it.
I don't know, Vera, have you ever played Dungeon Crawl Classics? Have you ever done a funnel?
No, I'm curious though.
It's wild. It's definitely wild. But it is a throwback to this idea that characters are disposable until you invest in them, until you make them something. And it was not uncommon for players to bring backup characters to D&D sessions. And there's the original Killer Dungeon, of course, was the Team of Horrors from 1978, and Garrett Gygax.
Yes.
Let me tell you, boys. Team of Horrors is not for the faint of heart. It is punishing, and there's a really good reason why most people don't trot it out. I honestly wouldn't even recommend trotting it out because it's that punishing. Unless you just really are a goober for gamer history like me. So Team of Horrors was a response to players saying that the modules were too easy. And the adventure, which was an asymmetrically trapped crypt designed around a demi-lich called Asurayrak. It was originally designed as a tournament module where a lot of people where people would compete over several days to see how far they could get, okay, before they all died in horrible fashion, usually. And so for Team of Horrors, TPKs was a feature, not a bug. Your death count from Team of Horrors was kind of a badge of experience. Like I did the Team of Horrors. I died in the Team of Horrors. Like was almost an ironic T-shirt that you could wear.
I feel like I have seen a pin with that on it somewhere. And like, of course, because it's designed to kill you, this is not a place you'd necessarily want to take your party you're in love with to, right? Because it's impossible. The way it's designed is so sadistic and deliberately plays into what characters might try and do to defend themselves that it's highly likely it'll TPK. In fact, it's sort of the design. So
yeah, the philosophy of this era, and this is why the reason I want to explain this is because this is where a lot of my history is from. Like I was trained by people who did these things, and it informed a lot of how I approached gaming throughout my life. The philosophy was that character death without dramatic flair was acceptable and even admirable because it reflected the unforgiving reality of the game world. It reflected a world that you earned your survival, okay, through being cautious. Now, this is the era where 10-foot poles were used to tap the floor, right, to check for traps. This is the era where people would spend, I wouldn't say hours, but they certainly spent almost an hour planning things out before they would go into a room full of giants to try and steal the treasure. Resource management was a big deal. So nothing was guaranteed and there was no safety net. And there were a lot of people who really liked that high wire act. So retreating from a dungeon in that idea was not a failure. It was wisdom. It was a tactic that you were like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to come back stronger. Now, beginning in the 90s with White Wolf, and then going into the 2000s with third edition D&D, and accelerating all the way up to today, there's a shift that's made role-playing games far more about narrative collaboration and far less about puzzles to be solved and tactical challenges to be gamed out. And I for one am very happy about this change.
You don't miss tapping the ground with a 10-foot pole?
No, I don't. Not in the slightest. But I want to say it out loud so that people understand where some of these attitudes originated from and why they may persist, and why certain games like the OSR movement or Dungeon Crawl Classics feel so unforgiving. So I don't know. I think most GMs live in a hybrid space. They live somewhere between the narrative collaboration and the tactical puzzle. They're certainly, I have had players who are very into doing really cool moves in combat, and like some of them are Warhammer players. They're like, hey, I'm going to try this tactical shift. If I move over here, we could flank this guy. You know, there is a satisfaction to be gained from getting the right numbers at the right time.
Yeah, and it's satisfying to do things that feel consequential. Like, I'm of the opinion that an entirely narrative game that like has minimal dice rolling, that has like super simple systems, is less satisfying to play because you have less agency, because there are fewer choices to make. It's literally just like, all right, do I win in the way where I look cool, or do I win in the way where it looks like I had a hard time? And that's like your options, basically.
I have a feeling that this show is one of the flaws of Lorebeards and Roleplaying is that you and I think too much alike. There's very little we disagree on, and that's hilarious to me.
Well, clearly that means we're right about everything, which is a good way to be, I think. So I already knew I was, but it's good you are too. So, you know.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I try and make sure and talk, devil's advocate. In a lot of cases, just say there are people who believe otherwise. But yeah, you and I are on the same page. You and I are on the exact same page when it comes to this. It's like, I prefer, I don't hate purely narrative games, but I definitely prefer games that are not pure narrative, that are a mix between fun die rolling and doing cool stuff and being fun and silly, but also have immersive character moments and emotional depth and risks of consequences. So yeah,
I think that the appeal of a purely narrative game is just different because it's more about the collaborative storytelling and very little about the stakes. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that the investment in collaborative storytelling born from game mechanics and exploiting them and like thinking them through carefully matters a lot. Like, introducing the concept of like a game does a great deal for a narrative. It makes it something that has inherent challenge and less guaranteed outcomes. The satisfaction is increased. You're able to feel as if your actions have real direct consequences as opposed to acting out a play together, which can be fun. Improv is fun, but different, you know?
Do you want to read this one from Mr. Fitzumbra?
0 survivors, 100% fun from a one-shot of only Warplanes, the 13th Feudal Legion. Yeah, I mean, that's how the All Guardsmen party started. They had a totally insane Tyrannid battle that was, like, guaranteed to churn through, like, 20 character sheets. Talk about backup sheets. They were told to bring 10. And at the end of it, whoever was left over became drafted by the Inquisition because, like, hey, you guys seem fated.
Yeah, there's another comment here from Golden Chaos that says the Tomb of Horrors was built to fuck with players who got overconfident with busted characters, if I remember correctly. Yes, that's definitely part of its origin.
I recall a lot of the traps were just not possible to negate with tools that people had gotten confident with using to get out of jail free. Like there were instant disintegration traps. There were pits that would muffle somatic components of spells you couldn't cast to get out.
It's pretty wild. And here's one from Lich Lord Kiers. My 1d4 plus 1 wizard. So back in the day, wizards had a d4 hit points, and yes, I've played the guy who rolled the 1 on the d4.
2 HP wizard, my beloved. Well, you even take average there. You're at what, friggin' 4
Three.
HP, 3 HP.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Even taking the average.
Grim.
And I once played a game with a guy who played a barbarian who had a D12 hit points, and he also rolled a 1.
Kind of brutal for level 1, yeah.
Just imagine this poor. I wish he was here to share his story, because I imagine the emotions he was feeling at that time were like, "Oh, cool, I'm this big muscle-bound barbarian. Oh no, I have 1 hit point. Oh god."
Well, no shit, his character was raging.
Right.
I would be too.
Right. So where would you like to go from here?
Well, we've covered a lot of tools to deal with TPKs. We've covered the structure of how a TPK happens. We've covered ways to avoid and head off TPKs. We've arguably covered the advantages of TPKs. There are numerous disadvantages, to be sure.
I do have some things we could talk about for the TPC, the total party capture, like some different options to how to do that.
Yeah, so we can go into like recovery mode here, because I think the TPC is the most obvious path for a lot of encounters if the team is like destroyed and it's not a game that has like instant head explosion rules, wherein they'll get scooped up and carried off, because a lot of enemies will do that, whether they're like sort of sentient creatures or they save their victims for later or whatever else. And these are arcs that are divisive. Like at the start of the day here, we were told about a story wherein a Wrath and Glory campaign ended because people were not down to be the prey of the Drukhari.
Which, very reasonable. Drukhari are awful. You don't want to be captured by the Drukhari.
But a total party capture is a pretty dramatic shift in its own way.
True. And as we said before, I think that it works best when the enemy has some kind of clear and plausible reason to take prisoners, which, as you very aptly pointed out, can in fact be true even of beasts like spiders. I was like, oh yeah, that's what happened in The Hobbit, wasn't it? They all got tied up in the tree. So the first option for TPC for total party capture is to do a prison arc. Right now, you're in a cell. You all wake up in a cell, stripped of all your gear.
Yeah, but this will feel like a reset, because suddenly you're naked and afraid and kind of powerless. And a lot of campaigns start this way because it's a good starting point. You have no tools. You have to rely on your wits and your personality. You have to find a way out, you know?
Yeah, Out of the Abyss starts with you guys in prison. Of course, famously Skyrim, you know? Oh, yeah. You're finally awake.
Well, Skyrim and Oblivion. Yeah.
Well, Elder Scrolls in general, I believe. Yeah. So the arc of a prison is to escape. Like, that's the goal. You want to get out. I would say the most cinematic version of this is the Spartacus model, where the prisoners are meant to fight in some big gladiatorial combat, which this would work. This would definitely work for Drukhari, to be clear. For Dark Eldar, if you do get captured in your next Wrath of Glory game, request the gladiatorial purpose, because it is far more cinematic. You could, of course, be headed for enslavement, or you could be headed for getting devoured, depending on the enemies. But it can be a lot of fun to break out of prison, deal with your captors, recover your gear, and it can actually be a really interesting challenge. It can add to the story and teach you that rushing into combat isn't always the best idea.
It can also be a proper deer, like Morbid Mind is sharing that they had a TPC and Spelljammer that
Whoa!
15 years of enslavement, which is I would call that a derail of the campaign.
Actually, okay, so fun fact, this is a feature that is often used in manga and in animation and a lot of other mediums, the idea of a time skip. It's becoming more common, actually. And time skips can be really interesting for character development. It'd be really interesting for world building and the story. So yeah, I'm actually not opposed to this at all. I think a time skip would be a way to add value. Possibly.
Well, yeah, like if used carefully, because of course this is going to meddle with your character's plans a little bit, right?
Yep.
Things they were trying to stop will have developed in their absence.
But it also creates a lot of new opportunities for interesting stories. What happened to your girlfriend that you left behind? What happened to the mentor who was expecting you to make something of yourself? There's going to be some interesting narrative development from that, and I like that. On the other hand, you'll probably be a freaking expert in killing illithids.
You better be.
Right? It doesn't have to be prison, though. It can also be debt. And this is something that happened to me in a Shadowrun game where I thought I was dead. I had gotten caught by Lone Star, which are the corporate police, during a mission and thrown in a cell. And I was like, well, this character's dead. I guess I'm never playing this guy again. And the game master's like, not exactly, because Lone Star is still a corporation. And if you're captured by a group that has it has a use for you, they might want to cut a deal. Maybe they're going to display you as a trophy, but maybe they want to have some insurance against a threat in the future. Maybe they want to have maybe they want you to pull off a heist or assassinate someone or do a very difficult diplomatic task that is actually setting you up to be blamed for starting a war. Happened to me.
Yeah, because in a lot of cases, these big organizations, these evil villains, you're not their biggest problem. You're a problem, and they're happy to deal with you. But the enemy of my enemy is my tool. Like in Temple of Spite, we wrote in a lot of enmity between the Druchii on board the Black Ark in order to have it possible that if you were captured, they might want to sick you on their rivals because that is beneficial to them.
Right. It doesn't necessarily have to be the bad guys that offer you a debt. There could be a benefactor. There could be someone who buys you out of slavery or rescues you from the prison who has a use for you. And you incur a debt to them rather than to whatever horrible thing would have killed your party and instead captured you.
Yeah, there's a few ways to run it. This can be a way to introduce like a perhaps morally gray patron. This can be a way to establish new characters, right?
Or you could become a trophy. You could be kept as proof that the villain is just as strong as he says he is. This can be a thing, like Warhammer is a good example where this might be a reason to not kill an enemy, would be to instead display them as proof of your valor. But this is still, it's humiliating. It's probably the most humiliating version of the total party capture is to be displayed as trophies. But it is at least a way forward without killing everyone. So there's that.
Yeah, and with this kind of stuff, you have to be aware of like how your party will respond to it, because some people will take it very badly if they're put on display or like just embarrassed, they're paraded around and humiliated. They will not be able to reconcile that. That's a effective TPK because they're just not willing to play that scenario. They're like, all right, fuck this.
Yeah, be very careful with the trophy option, I would say. Superheroes though, that's a good supervillain one though.
That's classic and likely rapid fire. Like that's in superheroes that you can just kill them. Like they should die and come back like 6 times. Screw it.
No one could have survived that, and then the body can never be found, right? That's a fun way to do that. What about campaigns where death is real and permanent, but you want to preserve the investment and you want to have some kind of afterlife arc, like the idea of the ghosts that have to go find the artifact to transform themselves back to revive their actual bodies, right?
This happened to Sigmar once. It did.
I believe it.
Book club soon, Heldenhammer.
Hey. Just for people who don't know, Vera is also one of the hosts of Lorebeards Book Club with Lindsay Law, and they are covering some pretty cool stories. I hope you all will invite me on when you do Drakenfels, because I love that book.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a game actually called The Black Ballad. Are you familiar with The Black Ballad?
No, not at all.
It's from the Storytellers Forge Studios. Came out in 2023. And this campaign is explicitly designed as an afterlife arc for post TPK groups. It's set in the realm of the dead called the Sunless Crossing. And the party now is spirits. They must navigate the afterlife's politics and dangers to earn their resurrection or close.
Interesting.
Yeah,
so like it's a module to un-TPK.
It's like a mini campaign, man. I was like, this is actually really cool. And it converts the TPK into a pivot point rather than a conclusion. The deaths are real and consequential and honored, but they're not necessarily the end of the character. And I thought that was worth bringing up. I really want to go out and buy this product now.
Yeah, I like that. Like, you want to maintain that sense of consequence, right? I feel like it's important, but doing it in a way that is narrative forward and fleshes out the setting a little, kind of cool.
Well, that scene I pitched earlier about the Warlock Patron falls into the same category, because you can have for lack of a better word, some sort of divine waiting room where they're being given a quest to earn a second chance by a deity, by a Warlock Patron, by some extraplanar being. There's also the idea of the Ghost campaign. I believe there was an adventure or two for D&D 2nd edition. Somebody could probably tell me in the chat if what the name of that was, but there was at least one adventure that was basically now you're all ghosts, in the afterlife, which was kind of interesting. And you can also look at it as a way to explore the underworlds, the maybe not hell, but limbo, purgatory, whatever you want to call it. If there is some form of that in your campaign, that's not a bad way to add some world building. So you actually literally physically have them walk around in it.
It's a chance for your characters to touch the realm of the divine and like be not sure what happened after. It's a rare one because suddenly you're in a very different territory.
Right. And I really hate to say this, but it is definitely an option. You can always go the Sixth Sense with it and say that your party was already always dead.
Yes. Oh my God!
They've always been dead, and they're just now realizing it after the TPK. This would be, if it's handled well, it could be amazing. However, I'm gonna warn you about this ahead of time. If you're not confident about using this option, don't, because it can fall flat just as easily.
Tread carefully. Because you don't want to like invalidate what your characters have done so far, right?
No, but recontextualizing the campaign is not necessary. It's probably better than just ending the game, depending on how your players had. This is one of those talk to your player moments, I guess, but it could work. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, certain setups will lend themselves better than others too.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. What are some setups that would work great for that?
If you've got like, if the conceit for the game is that it's happening in a ominous, secluded locale, for example, if the lead-in is already suspicious, that's a little easier to get away with, right? If it's in a environment where they could be androids, presumably, right? Something like that. You could do like a pseudo-dead thing. Like if the party is like attacking Drakenfels and that's the campaign, sure, that'll work, right? Like, that's ominous, yeah.
One of my favorite games I was ever in was basically The Hangover, but D&D. We all woke up in a room with no memory of who we were, what we'd been doing, and we had to piece things together in the aftermath. And we, eventually came to realize we were fighting a monster that devoured memories, and that's why we woke up as amnesiacs. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what was really fascinating about that campaign is it was as much about who you were and figuring out who you were as it was about figuring out who you are now, which is not necessarily the same person. Because the game master was revealing to us who we had been, right?
Right.
And sometimes that was very different from the concept that you had in your head as a player. And so if you have a concept that is that where you're questioning some of your identity, or where reality itself may seem a little more hazy, that's one of those circumstances where I could see you were dead this whole time being a thing.
Yeah, like Curse of Strahd could pull this off.
Yes, Curse of Strahd absolutely could. Yeah, Ravenloft the General could pull this off very, very well. There's settings in Werewolf the Apocalypse in the spiritual realms. There's some places where this would really, really work very well. It just depends on what game you're playing and what the options are. Obviously, in any kind of cyberpunk or high-tech future, you've got the idea that maybe you're a digital consciousness in a simulation of some kind. Now we're really getting into some philosophical areas. But, you know, I mean, there's a lot of ways to make it work, is what I'm trying to get across.
There are also ways to make it not work. Like, this wasn't a TPK, but there was a saga of my Dark Heresy group that happened before I joined, where it was revealed that the entire adventure was a simulation that they'd been put in through some archaeotech machine the Inquisitor had. And this was very dissatisfying because there was no setup for it and it felt like barely any payoff.
Right. When the full BG3 party are the Dark Urge, says Morbid Mind. Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
Total party killers indeed.
Focano says, in the Seeker's Guide to Twisted Taverns 5e book, because everything is, well, not quite everything. One of their venues is the Tavern at the Edge of Oblivion. Oh, that would be really cool. Yeah. Your party could begin their adventure in a tavern and begin their new adventure in a totally different tavern. This one, you know, in the afterlife.
This was a thing in Hitchhiker's Guide, wasn't it?
Well, there was, yeah. They had the bar at the edge of the universe.
It rhymes. It rhymes.
I can't remember what it was called, unfortunately, but it did serve the Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster, which was a drink that once you sipped from it, tasted like someone was bashing out your brains with a slice of lemon wrapped around a large gold brick.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Which I always thought was a great description. Restaurant, so it was restaurant, not bar. Restaurant at the end of the universe. Yes, thank you. Edge of the Universe. Been a long time since I read that book. Would you? So you're a teacher, and you do manage a game group at a school.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree that one of the ways to help deal with TPKs would be to teach players how to fail well?
Yeah, there's a lot of top-down discussion of like what the mentality should be when you're running as a GM, because the GMs have pretty much the most responsibility and are generally the people who are like most driven to participate, right? There are always a couple of kids who really want to do it and then who inevitably feel like they don't want to do it anymore, maybe, but no one else can step up and do it well. So there's that kind of perma GM ominous foreboding thing. We try to like rotate things and let them have the chance to play, but when someone's running, we'll talk to them about like what they can do to make it fun for the players, to like try and include them, to cater to their needs, not like be punitive, and to prevent sudden catastrophe because they want to like play together and have fun. It's a little bit awkward of a format because they have like 30-minute sessions in the middle of the day every day, but the goal is to ward off sort of adversarial play and have it focus on character forward, story forward beats, and to try and keep things possible and to like intervene if necessary. I would say that because this sort of a supervised activity, it's a little bit more open to retcon or like subtle suggestion from our proctors than a home game that runs with a pizza box in the basement might be. But the goal is for them to have like a good time and like get to learn the game in a safe-ish environment. So
you're the expert on this. I'm going to say some things that I think are like some good messages that you can convey to a new player. And I want you to like tell me if any of these don't ring true and why, because again, you're the expert. I'm just a guy who's like, here's some things I thought would be useful. one of the things you can communicate to a new player, they can benefit from these very explicit early campaign conversations, is that failure is really just more of an opportunity than an end. The game is designed, well, most role-playing games are designed where characters can die. And that is not the game master breaking the rules. That is not necessarily a mistake that you made. That is just the rules working as intended.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to illustrate. I think that in our like school game scenario, we try to dissuade them from killing off characters necessarily. There's been some prompting as like, hey, you can do these things instead to avoid TPK, because the goal is to avoid like really hurt feelings, and there are already like plenty of potential for that in this kind of structure, because kids, they argue, etc. So when tensions can run high at the table between adults, they certainly can between freshmen and high school, right?
Good Lord, yeah. I shudder to think what I would have been like in high school D&D. Another thing you can say is that character death it can create story rather than end it. Some of the most memorable campaign moments begin with death or failure in general. Failure is not necessarily, doesn't mean that you've lost or that you've done something wrong. It can be just a cool moment to build on.
Yeah, and we try and incentivize that idea that things going wrong is a chance to fall forward, to fail forward, to have new scenarios emerge. The idea is to stress that it's collaborative and that it's meant to be inclusive and something that's fun for everybody involved. And admittedly, TPKs are hard to make this for a new GM, who pretty much all of the kids who are running are.
Right. I think another important thing I would talk to new players about is that retreating does not mean you've lost. It is a tactical choice. It's always available. Well, not always available, but it's usually always available. And sometimes it is actually the smartest thing you can do.
Yeah, and it can be character forward too. Like a character who's very eager to run is great fun, perhaps. Someone who's a little more cowardly, a little more inclined towards self-preservation.
We have some role models nowadays that we didn't have who are more inclined to run away. Usopp from One Piece is a great example.
Yeah.
Zenitsu from Demon Slayer. There are good role models now that we didn't have before who were really good at running away and doing things like that. I mean, Bugs Bunny is another, probably a far older example, but still. Yeah, I think teaching people that retreat is always a thing, or is usually a smart thing. Early on is a good advantage for new players. And then lastly, I would say that, if your character dies, that doesn't mean that everything you've helped build is lost. Those experiences can carry forward. You can have your twin brother, your friend, your sibling, your descendant can carry on.
And the whole dynasty.
Well, there's the idea of legacy characters and honoring that legacy or diverging from that legacy. That could be a really important character choice.
This is true. I do love legacy. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it is challenging to do in a thematically forward way for a new character or a new player who's more likely to just like, hey, this is my character, but it's their kid, which is fine because they want to play the same guy. We do try and ward away from super adversarial gaming, though, because it's the one thing I'd say to be most careful about for like a high school club is people trying to do the very war gamey style, and a lot of them are learning the system or don't even read the books before playing. So
yeah, Knights of the Dinner Table once again gives us some really good examples of this being funny but also bad. Whereas there's a moment where Bob's character gets killed due to some decision that Brian made, and he says, "Cool, my next character is my character's twin brother, whose name is the Anti-Brian." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've seen those grudge characters before. I've felt that urge in the past."
Yeah, the classic to make a character who's there to disagree with and really fuck with somebody else's character because you don't like them.
Bad idea. Don't do it. Very bad idea.
You think that's like a bad for the narrative, perhaps?
Yeah, well, distracting at best.
It'll tend to define things, that's for sure.
The OSR movement has a pretty interesting idea of how to approach handling TPKs, and that's the idea of building your character investment gradually rather than loading it in from the very beginning. They recommend keeping your backstories light and short and not being too attached until you've survived to around level 3. At which point you have earned that investment by surviving the genuinely dangerous early game part of the campaign. This is not about it's not about preventing attachment, it's about calibrating attachment. And I don't know, I see some value in it, even if it's not something I want to do personally.
There's something kind of morbid about that. It's like not naming a baby chicken until it's started to.
That is the same mindset. Yes, that is exactly the same mindset.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at that point where we want to give our final thoughts about TPKs, and then we can talk about the season in general, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, we do a bit of a season wrap up. We'll look forward.
Sure. Final thoughts of TPKs, Vera.
TPKs are a natural consequence of probability, of poor planning, of some combination thereof. There is a sliding scale of poor decision making to bad luck to bad planning in general that can lead to these scenarios happening. There is a lot of possibility, or rather, there are a lot of possible situations that can lead to a TPK. And there are a lot of tools you have to potentially ward them off, to potentially prevent a disaster, or to roll with it and make it into something that is more narrative forward. How appropriate it is to do these things will differ based on the kind of game you're running, the personality of your players, the tone, how far in you are, why the TPK is brewing. And there are a lot of tools you can use to make it hit less hard, to make it feel more significant, or to work through or around what's happening. A lot of things here depend. A lot of things matter. It's inevitably going to be memorable when a character dies. If many die, it's going to be even more so. So your murder may vary. You need to be attentive, honor your social contract where possible, but understand what it does psychologically, both for good and ill. Mostly ill, but in some cases, some good.
Yeah, you said it very well. I found the name of that adventure I was thinking of. It's Ghost Walk is the name of the adventure from 3035, where you can play as ghosts after a TPK. And tools like Ghost Walk and the Black Ballad, which I almost certainly will be picking up in the future because that sounds amazing. They give you options and alternatives for if it happens. It's not necessarily the absolute end. So don't freak out too badly. Although I am very guilty of that. I am the first guy to be like, okay, well, this is done. I'm gonna give up and move on to something else. So I may be that guy who needs a little bit of encouragement to say, no, it's okay. We can continue on just in a slightly different way. I never thought I honestly, before we did the show, I had never heard of the Black Ballad, and I had not heard of the idea of the We Were Dead All Along option either. So I've learned some things during the research.
It is cute.
Just for this episode. I have played Team 4s. I have had TPKs happen to me. I've been the cause of TPKs. It's just a fact that happens over, if you play D&D long enough, on a long enough timeline, you will almost certainly encounter a TPK at some point along that line. It's just, it's very, very likely to occur at some time. But it doesn't have to be traumatic, and it doesn't have to be the absolute end of everything. It can be a new beginning, and it can be a fun, memorable story that you tell on a podcast. Because all the stories I've told tonight were way less fun in the moment than they were in discussing it with you, Vera, and with the lore seekers on our channel.
Yeah, but you remember it, right? Like this stands out to you.
Yep. This is the part where I say, if you've enjoyed our deep dive into this role-playing aspect, please do us a favor, hit the like button and the subscribe button so that the algorithm can spread our crazy thoughts about TPKs to other unsuspecting minds. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been a pretty cool first season. We are looking into a second season of the show. We're planning things out right now. Get some cool guests lined up. We're trying to determine our topics right now. We've got our first one shot coming up, with more to come throughout season 2, I believe. A lot of things brewing. We're going to be playing Empire of Satanus before too long. Now that I'm done teaching for the year, time to prep, I have been getting into my Metalocalypse mood boards and cooking that up. We've got a couple of cool guests lined up you may recognize, and I know Ross has a few things he wants to run. We'll get some of the Lorebeards on for a few one-shots with good games and otherwise.
Yeah, I want to talk about... there is a game that is almost a cursed game, but is actually really interesting to discuss, which is Super Babes from the early 80s. I'd like to talk about the different versions of the Game of Thrones role-playing games. I'd like to talk about the different versions of Traveler. I think that'd be a really good episode to talk about, because that's hard sci-fi. It's very hard sci-fi as a setting. And we definitely want to cover Eclipse Phase, because goddamn, that's a cool concept.
Oh yeah, I'd love to get the devs on for that. I want to talk horror in the abstract.
Yeah, horror in games is a big one. Yeah, I'd like to discuss that for sure. At some point, we should do a look at the storyteller system and all of the Vampire Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, all that.
Yeah, and talking about like narratives and storytelling and RPGs to begin with could be fun. BattleTech maybe. Yeah, like I love MechWarrior. I am a MechWarrior online player.
I love the BattleTech universe. I don't think they've ever had a good role-playing game, which is...
We have been making one internally at my table, and it has been a very slow process. The guy spearheading it has been struggling with making like Death from Above work with like different size rules and like out of mech stuff and getting the clan battle suits to behave well. And it's a whole ordeal, but super worthwhile. I hope it's like eventually ready, but...
That's really cool. I want to throw up a banner really quick. So one of the things I do is I do create role-playing games that you can buy on DriveThruRPG. This is the link for the publisher, Harmless Forest Creature. And if you go there, you can look at some of our new releases. I've re-released the Accursed setting, which is a dark fantasy setting for Savage Worlds. The short version is it's Hellboy meets Solomon Kane. And you play as monsters fighting witches who have taken over the world. So
I'm in.
Go check it out. I would very much appreciate it. And I just thought I would take this time to put it up there for people who are curious and want to see more about it. What's your favorite episode so far of the season?
Ooh, that's tough. My favorite episode? I'm indecisive. I really enjoyed a lot of our conceptual episodes. We're talking about like ideas for like how the table works and operates. I like the kind of like meta space a lot. I really enjoyed, I think, all of our interviews. It's great fun to pick someone's brain and hear what they have to say about a project they love. I had a lot of fun making Dark Heresy characters.
I think it's going to be hard to top Cursed RPGs. That was both traumatic and hilarious at the same time.
That was very special. I was sort of hollowed out during part of that. I think I've repressed some of the memories. I said some things I regret. I apologize to my loving father. Sorry, Dad. I enjoyed that. That's a good one. Fuck, that was fun.
That was really fun. I also really liked the interview with Mike Mason where we talked about how Dark Heresy and Cthulhu are related. That was a lot of fun. Neon Odyssey was great.
Yes.
Session Zero and How to Be a Good Player and How to Be a Good DM. Those were all some of my favorites. I would like to do the RuneQuest one again. I think you were not here for that one, unfortunately, and it was just me and the guest, and I think we wandered a little too far afield. So
Happily, yeah.
oh, Litroy Kier says that he liked Nordic LARP. Hey,
He was a great guest. Like it was an interesting scene for me as someone who's like proximity to Nordic LARP is like the specter of going to a live Disco Elysium event, right? So I learned a lot.
that was a hoot. Is there any episode you'd like to go back and do again or do differently?
If we had the material, I would love to run back cursed RPGs. I feel like it's hard to find that many more that are like that ominous. It could be.
I think we could find some that are not cursed, but maybe mildly different. It's just Made, the role-playing game, is a good one for that.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about playing that.
Right, which it's fun. The aforementioned Super Babes is another one that falls in the Palace of the Silver Princess would be something we could cover there. Wings of the Valkyrie, which is another product that was actually pulled from shelves.
Oh.
Yeah. That's an adventure for third or fourth edition champions. I think it's third edition champions. And the concept of Wings of the Valkyrie is that it's the reason it was pulled from game shelves is because the whole concept of Wings of the Valkyrie is your superheroes time travel into the past to save Hitler from an assassination attempt, because Hitler in charge means that the war will end in the favor of the Allies.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that face you made was
oh boy.
Yeah, awkward is that. Oh, that's what we call as awkward RPGs. They're not cursed, but they're awkward.
Hard to write mom about.
Right.
I would love to do some more Dark Heresy coverage as well in the wake of the upcoming computer game. I'm playing the beta of that a little bit, and we might be able to land one of the devs to come on and talk once they're out of like the beta crunch phase. So we'll see. Not sure yet. I was talking to them via email, and they're gonna get back to us as they get out of like crunch time. But it'd be really cool.
I would lose my mind if we could get a dev from Alcat to come on this show and talk to us about Dark Heresy.
Well, I think matchmaking you with one of the devs there would be awesome. I'd love to be part of that.
That would freaking rule.
Also, if you still need a key for the beta, I have one for you.
Ooh, no. I will see you after the show.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'd like to do in the future is like have a giveaway of some kind. We did one with the RPG book of Dark Heresy, but we could probably get some more giveaways. I think that'd be a lot of fun to do. If there's anything out there you guys have been wanting to see from us, please join the Discord. If there's any of our mods in the Discord, I think Fakano is a mod, right? If Fakano could put up a link to the Discord, that'd be really cool. And you could go on the Discord. You can talk to us about things you'd like us to see us cover. If there's any particular system or product that needs to be discussed, I'm down for it. And, I have a few things I can still talk about. Renegade Legion. Renegade Legion in general is a really interesting game that spanned both role-playing games and war games of different scales. It was very fast. It was very experimental and fascinating. We could talk about Paranoia at some point too, because wow, that game and Tune, both of those two are very, very wild games to discuss. Oh, we've got one here from Favorite Fan Supplements.
A still emerging field. They're as time goes on, there are more and more like really high quality, interesting projects made.
Does this count as third party books for D&D and stuff like that? Because Valkyspire Secrets is awesome.
Yeah, like the difference between third party and fan supplement is whether it sells like over 1,000 copies, I guess. Like whether they're charging for it at all.
There was a really good third party one for third edition called Arrows of the Queen, which is all about archery, and it was a really fun dive into all the different types of archery and things you could do with archery in D&D back in third edition. I don't think anybody other than me bought it. I had to print it out at like a Kinko's is the only way I could get a physical product of it. So that's one example. What about you?
I'm a big fan of the Ratcatchers Guild. Their publications for Warhammer Fantasy.
Very good. Yep. I hired a guy who used to do that kind of stuff for Dark Heresy.
Oh yeah.
This dude, he was making rules for Tyranids and rules for, I can't remember. He had this site where he did all this stuff for Dark Heresy. And I was like, man, you're really good. His name was Nathan Dowdell. And I ended up hiring him as a writer on a lot of the 40K roleplay game lines. He went on to become a full-time developer for Modifius and was I believe he led development on the Star Trek Adventures line.
Oh wow, look at that. Yeah, I feel validated. I've been telling my students, like, hey, if you like doing art, make stuff that's high quality and put it out there and your portfolio grows, you might get some offers. And I feel like that is evidence in favor of my point.
Absolutely, 150%. Are there any other topics you'd like to see us cover in the future?
We'll brew it more. There's a couple of fun things we can get into. I like the conceptual spaces, as you know. I like to talk shop and talk table stories and invite the conceptual range of the art of games. I wouldn't mind talking in the more abstract sense about role-playing games as an art form. I like that as a topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart.
Well, sure. I mean, why don't you send me a list and I will put it on the Lorebeards RPG Google document, and then we can just throw them out there. One thing we do over at Lorebeards 40K is we often let the fans vote on subjects that they want to see covered. We have not been doing that, but in our next season we could, if that's something that's interesting.
Yeah, totally. We could put up a vote after our first episode of season 2. We'll get some guests on in the early hours too. It'll be fun. I'm really excited. It's been a great pleasure so far. RPGs are a great passion of mine, so it's been a lot of fun to share stuff with everybody and have good talks about cool topics and meet some cool people, and I'm excited.
Yeah, same for me. This has been very, very fulfilling. I think one of the things we also do over at Lorebeards 40K is we have what's called Let's Builds. And that's where we basically present a lot of options for chat. Chat picks an option, and then we move to the next bit. And we have built things like Rogue Traders Retinues and Orc War Bosses, Orc Freebooters, actually. And we could do this for either creating a character or creating a game or creating a setting.
Creating games and settings sounds like a lot of fun, because there's ways we could use that to make things people can play on their tables or put stuff in the Lorebeards Patreon, etc. There's a lot of fun potential here.
Right. I'd like to get my friend Mike Lafferty to come on the show, because he's got a very small press company called Faney Goat Games, and he'd be a great one to talk about, publishing your own stuff on Drive-Thru RPG if you want to do that. How a small publisher survives. Famously, he made the game Cocaine Owlbear. And he's got another one called Pew Pew, and somehow Pew Pew returned, which are both very funny. That would be a good guest to get. I'd love to get Jolly Blackburn on here, who's the creator of Knights at the Dinner Table, as well as Aces and Eights and several products for Kenzer & Company. Wild West role-playing is something I've wanted to do for a long time. And no, I don't mean Deadlands. I mean actual cowboys in the Wild West. It's a niche product. I get it. It's probably like, I'll probably end up being like one of those old men who just play like the train games where you are so obsessed about locomotives, and I'll be that guy in the corner and be like, cowboys are really cool and they have really stuff in the Wild West. I may be that coot who's ranting about Wild West RPGs, but that's something I've always wanted to do.
It's pretty cool out there.
Oh yeah, we could follow up our Holy Grails with a White Whales episode where we talk about the games we've always wanted to play and never did.
Oh yeah, Holy Grails is a lot of fun.
Right. Cyber Generation is one of those games I've always wanted to play and never have. I've always wanted to do a really nice in-depth Werewolf the Apocalypse and never got to play it all the way through. It's a White Whale. I still quest for it. All right, we were in our last 10 minutes of our show. What do you think about turning it over to the fans and just answer questions?
Yeah, absolutely. A little end of season 1 Q&A.
Yay! All right, chat, you know what to do. Ask us anything. Dun, dun, dun. I do like this comment from Kano. Death hangs out here along with a bunch of people in limbo, and you can get out, but you need to win a wager. Yeah, this is the Bill and Ted sequel version, where they play games with death until they win and get out.
You got to get a Death to play D&D with you.
There was actually a couple comic strips about this when Gygax passed away, and they were talking about him like Death being like, oh my god, what have I gotten myself into? He's playing games with Gary Gygax in the afterlife. Those were fun. Here's a question: have either of you played Shadow Dark, and if so, what did you think?
Hey, I have not. I'm curious about it though. I like edgy stuff. I can't help it.
I've not played it, but I own it, and I'm excited to play it because are you familiar with the mechanic in Shadow Dark?
I know it's like dungeon crawly, like white level related and ominous. I've seen the hardcovers and they're beautiful.
So one of the things is that your torches burn in real time, and each torch only lasts an hour of real time. And so there's this pressure and a ticking clock of the light literally dimming as you're going through the dungeon, and you only have so many torches. I'm pretty excited about it. This would be a good one to talk about and cover actually as an episode. Would be just talk about Shadow Dark, because it is a thing that is becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, I've played very few like true OSR games, so I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued.
Volcano asks, "What's your favorite dice system? D100, D20, XDX? What's the proper way to roll?"
D100 with one of those like circular spherical like orb die, and you use that and just like watch it bull around.
Oh god, the Game Science D100. Oh, that is literally just a ball. And
we love the orb.
Oh lord, I hate those freaking things.
Make sure you level playing service, or else.
God. My favorite dice system. I am after playing games for over 40 years, I can tell you that I'm a dice pool guy. I like dice pools. That's probably my favorite way to play role-playing games, with a dice pool. Usually D6s, and usually a nice big chunky handful of D6s. I played a lot of Champions. Chunky handfuls of D6s. Played a lot of Shadowrun. Chunky handfuls of D6s. Prowlers of Paragons. Chunky handfuls of D6s. I liked it so much. Star Wars D6. Also chunky handfuls of D6s. I liked it so much that when I made Wrath of Glory, that is a game about chunky handfuls of D6s.
Well, there you have it.
I clearly have a type when it comes to die rolling. I like percentile. I think percentile is fine. I like D20. I think D20 is fine. The D10 dice pools games, like the storyteller games, those are also interesting. I don't like them quite as much as the D6 dice pool ones. And Savage Worlds I like as well, even though that is often different types of dice.
Well, you're gonna love Pokeroll.
Have you played Savage Worlds? Have you played?
I've played related systems, but not Savage Worlds proper. I played Dungeon World.
Fair enough. Dungeon World. Oh yeah, there's D6s. That's an outgrowth of Fudge, I believe. So it's D6s, right?
I didn't like it.
I find it to be great for one shots.
Yeah, I can see that.
We played a Powered by the Apocalypse game, which was about being characters in a telenovela, and it was called Pasión de las Pasiones, Passion of the Passionate, Passions of the Passionate is what it means. It was awesome. It was so much fun. Do you believe in having a hoard of dice or just one tried and true set? Says the Exiled One.
I believe in having a pile of math rocks you never use, and then a core set that is whatever vibe you want for what you're trying to do. So you have your pool for like weird scenarios, for like crazy exploding die, for like hitting AoE attacks, and you've got your real set for your core gameplay.
I am the dragon under the mountain when it comes to dice. I have a hoard. I love the fact that I have just absolute tons of dice. Do I have favorites? Yes, but No, I like to get them all out and count them and then let them roll around on the table and just I will grab a handful of anything out and roll it just because they all deserve a chance to get their glory.
Yeah, I play online almost exclusively for the last like 2 years, so I don't get to use mine. I misplaced them. I forgot where they were. They were next to my bed. I had put them like in my windowsill so I could like have
Wow.
them while I slept a while back.
Wow. Mickey Stopwatch says, "What's your favorite character concept that you've made, played, or simply put on paper?"
Oh man, I'm now mourning my Warhammer game again. I liked my war dancer there a lot. She was an Azrai. She was an exploration of the concept of what happens to the people left behind when Ariel takes a young nobleman to become Orion. And she was very bitter and a drunkard who was doing her best to channel some shredded divinity to get even. And it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I had a 3-drink minimum for her for a while, and that was a exciting way to play at the table. I also love my Pokemon character. She's very sweet. Sort of a mini professor type who is very much a foil to the other player in that campaign, whose character is a sort of headstrong, very physical creature, and it's a lot of fun.
I made a character that I only got to play once, but I loved the character, and I always wanted to go back and play it again. Mechanically, it was a female elf barbarian. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But concept wise, and this is where I really got into it, is the character was actually a dryad who had survived her tree being cut down and was so full of rage about the act that's where the barbarian part came from, was, and the desire to adventure was actually to gather the funds necessary to find the people that cut down her tree and deal out revenge upon them.
That's cool.
Right. I enjoyed that greatly because they're like, okay, what does the elf think? And I'd be like, I'm not an elf. They're like, but you have pointy ears and the whole thing. And I'm like, I mean, I look like an elf. I get that. but also like just the quiet simmering pot of rage that was boiling over at any moment. That was also really fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Great question, Mickey Stopwatch. Thank you.
My fresh wounds, they're opened.
Volcano asks, point buy or 46 drop the lowest?
I prefer a higher power curve for like base characteristics. So I would say 46 drop with the option to point buy if you don't like the average. And like one reroll that can either be point buy instead or can be just a full reroll. I don't mind it curving up. I think it's fine. I think you can just tune the encounters to match it. Point buy is the most fair, but feels a little dull to me.
I'm fine with either, but what you said would be fine with me too. So I guess I don't really have a preference per se.
Yeah, as long as it's like fair, it's fine. I think it's okay for the characters to have like higher base totals for their stats, though. You can accommodate for this in terms of like balance for stuff. So,
you want to read this one?
It's a lot of fun. Be warned, there's a high chance it'll die. Excellent! TPKs! Very good.
I think he's talking about Shadow Dark.
Yeah.
Also, amazing avatar. It's Andre the Giant hanging out with Godzilla, and they're both getting ice cream.
It is tremendous. It is tremendous.
What about this one? Would you like to read this one?
Would RPGs be improved by a Sorry-style domed quick-to-roll experience? That is what it feels like to play on Roll20, and it's not bad. It's not bad. I feel like if it were properly a physical dome, I would enjoy it more. It reminds me of like those craps machines they have at casinos where it's like a giant die in a dome that bounces around while you play. Anything that like emulates casino structure is probably good for your retention. So hey, you can invest in the game that way. Literally? ?
It's the Alliance says, I have a 2-pound metal die, D100. It's my self-defense die.
Very nice. Like a shot put.
Exiled One asks, if your D&D character died, would you accept a bargain with Tiamat to be revived?
Oh, easily. Tiamat's one of the coolest gods. What's there to lose? Come on, go for it.
Depends on the character. Depends on the character. Some character, I mean, Nimmerdell, which was my Dryad Barbarian, she would definitely take that deal because she's got business to take care of. But many of my other characters would not be okay with that because Tiamat is evil, and that's just a bad idea.
But Tiamat's so stylish.
I mean,
that's the problem.
She is a prominent part of the 1983 cartoon, the animated series. So, you know, it's got nostalgia. It's got nostalgia right here for me, baby. I'm all about it. There's a Pokemon RPG, says Devin Urbina.
Yeah, Devin, it's unofficial. It's very cute. It runs kind of like World of Darkness. I have been in talks with the developer to get her on at some point. We'll see. We'll see. It is near and dear to my heart. So I would love to talk about it at some point because it's a good example of a very sort of family-friendly leaning role-playing game where it's sort of cheerful and bright, but can be very high stakes and very cool. So,
yeah, fun fact: it's not the first one of those either. There was an older version called Cockfighting Seizure Monsters,
which is an amazing title.
I was wondering if you're familiar with it. I think the full title is Cute and Fuzzy Cockfighting Seizure Monsters. And it was part of the Big Eye Small Mouth line and was published. Oh, God, when was this published? I want to say like early 2000s. But that title is just amazing.
It's so good.
All right, well, we're at the end of our episode. Would you like to take us out?
Yeah, thank you guys for letting us end the season here with a discussion of total party kills, which are pretty final and will, of course, be the final entry in Season 1 of Lorebeards and Role-Playing Proper. Look forward to a lot of cool stuff in Season 2. We're going to be doing one-shots, more cool interviews, talking about cool topics. Expect more votes, more things. Some clips possibly coming up soon. A lot of cool stuff brewing. Thank you guys so much for all of the support for the past several months. It's been a really awesome time, a lot of fun. Thank you.
And you can find both of us on Twitch. I am twitch.tv/TheRossWatson, and you are twitch.tv/ Vera Samilla. Yep. So go check us out there. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye.